Chapter 281, Rose Springshaper, 2. Arthur and I finished our dance just as the next song began to play, sending more couples onto the floor. The atmosphere shifted, the ballroom filling with movement and laughter as the celebration truly began. I turned to him. "Do you want to meet my father?" Arthur tilted his head slightly, considering. "Sure." "You don't have to," I added, watching his reaction. "He just wants to meet you." Arthur smiled. "I don't mind. If anything, I should get to know him." Satisfied, I nodded and linked my arm with his, leading him toward where my father was speaking with other guests. My father was effortlessly holding court, exchanging pleasantries with nobles and corporate heads alike. But the moment his eyes landed on us, his attention shifted, a knowing smile forming on his face. Arthur inclined his head in a polite bow. "Greetings, Marquis Springshaper." My father chuckled. "No need to be so stiff." He took a sip from his glass before regarding Arthur with sharp yet amused eyes. "I am glad to finally meet one of the biggest clients of Vauquert, as well as rank one of the greatest generation." He paused, his smile widening. "Though, of course, I am more pleased to meet the young man who has captured my daughter's interest." I felt my face heat up instantly. "Father." He laughed. Arthur, ever composed, responded smoothly. "I am honored to be considered someone Rose likes." My father hummed, eyes narrowing ever so slightly as he observed him. "Well, you are a special young man." His tone was thoughtful, appraising. "Such strength, such potential at your age." Arthur met his gaze without wavering. "Thank you, Marquis. That means a lot." "Anyway, you two should enjoy yourselves," my father said, smiling as he dismissed us with a casual wave. Arthur and I turned away, walking side by side as the lively hum of conversation filled the ballroom. "Well, that was pleasant," Arthur remarked. I raised an eyebrow. "Did you expect otherwise?" He let out a small chuckle, scratching the back of his head. "Let's just say I have experience with Rachel's father." I sighed. "That's entirely different. You were in a coma for a month, Arthur. Rachel personally healed you every day, constantly traveling back and forth between Mythos Academy and the Creighton estate through gates just to keep you stable." Arthur nodded, his expression softening. "I know. I'm very grateful to her." As we continued walking, immersed in quiet conversation, I suddenly noticed someone approaching. Arthur stiffened. I turned to see a boy, tall, sharp-featured, carrying himself with the kind of confidence that came from both power and status. His black eyes gleamed under the chandeliers, his onyx hair a clear mark of his lineage. Jack Blaispout. Son of Duke Blaispout, heir to one of the most powerful noble houses in the Slatemark Empire, second only to the imperial family itself. He inclined his head slightly, offering a polite smile. "Greetings." His voice was smooth, deliberate. His gaze flickered between us before settling on me. "Congratulations, Lady Rose." I nodded, offering a practiced, courtly smile in return. "Thank you, Lord Jack Blaispout." Although his words were directed at me, his eyes never left Arthur. In this world, 3 names stood at the forefront of our generation. Lucifer Windward. Jack Blaispout. Arthur Nightingale. 3 prodigies, each with power that set them apart from the rest. And geniuses? Geniuses were drawn to one another. That was inevitable. But the way Jack was looking at Arthur now, this wasn't mere curiosity. There was too much tension. Too much hostility. Jack's smile was polished, his posture relaxed, yet every inch of him radiated challenge. "I've heard a lot about you too," he said smoothly. "Current rank 1 of Mythos Academy." He extended his hand. Arthur took it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a shift. A near imperceptible clash of mana. It was subtle. Controlled. Contained within the handshake. But I could feel it. Their energies flared against each other in a silent contest, pushing, testing, challenging. I narrowed my eyes slightly. I was right. These two didn't just acknowledge each other as rivals. They didn't like each other. Which was strange. As far as I knew, they had barely interacted before. And yet, here they were. And the air between them was crackling. Underscore 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 underscore. Someone annoying now stood in front of me. Jack Blaze Spout. The primary antagonist of Saga of the Divine Swordsman. The one who bonded with the Orb of Avarice and inherited the heavenly demon's memories and gift. A parallel to Lucifer Windward. Lucifer had two body aspect gifts. Jack had two mind aspect gifts. Lucifer was proud, but at his core, he was still a hero. Jack was the opposite. Pure evil. And the future calamity. You've grown stronger, he murmured, voice dipping into a whisper. His words slithered into my ears, laced with mana. Isn't that right, Emperor of the World? I kept my face neutral. Luna's voice rang in my head. How did he detect me? The heavenly demon inside him was at the level of a demigod, I answered. Your seal can't work against something like that. Jack grinned, sharp and amused. You're playing a dangerous game, demon child, I whispered back, infusing mana into my voice. His smile widened. How about we talk alone, he suggested, this time loud enough for others to hear. I glanced at Rose. I'll be back, I assured her with a smile before following Jack. We entered a private chamber, and the moment the door shut, a soundproof barrier flared to life. No witnesses. I turned to face him. How did you know? I asked. Even with the heavenly demon's presence inside him, detecting Luna's existence shouldn't have been natural. Jack leaned against the wall, completely at ease. I had my suspicions after Evelyn told me about you. I just needed to confirm it for myself. I frowned. Are you not afraid I'll expose you? Jack chuckled. You can't. I narrowed my eyes. There's zero evidence, he shrugged. And I'm a duke's son. You'd be putting your life on the line in a trial that I would win. I clenched my fist. The worst part about Jack. He could completely hide his miasma. Even more than normal contractors. Which meant that even if I dragged him to trial, nothing would come of it. It was how, in the original novel, one of Lucifer's friends had ended up dead, because he accused Jack, only for Jack to walk away innocent, fooling everyone. Jack flicked his fingers, and white flames danced at his fingertips, ethereal, shifting embers that pulsed with a purity unnatural for something born of him. Nirvana flames. The epitome of purification. A force that mirrored Lucifer's white mana and the sanctity of pure light, yet distinct in its own right. And in the hands of someone like him? It could erase anything. Including recordings. Come on now, Jack said, voice carrying an easy amusement. Let's not be childish. I exhaled through my nose, resisting the urge to click my tongue. So? What do you want? I asked flatly. Jack smiled. Well, I have the upper hand here, don't I? He spread his arms lazily, like this was all one big joke. I want Rose Springshaper. I froze. What? My voice was sharp. Jack tilted his head, rubbing the back of his neck like he was discussing a trade deal. Evelyn keeps asking for her daughter, he said, almost bored. So, I want her. How about it? Seems like a fair deal to me. I scoffed. There is no way I'm saying yes to that. My gaze darkened. Jack knew it, too. He sighed, shaking his head. Yeah, I figured you'd say that. Then, his expression shifted. Gone was the lazy amusement. His dark eyes glinted, something dangerous sparking within them. But how long do you think you can protect all of them? His voice was soft, too soft. Cold. Like he already knew the answer. Against us? The air in the room seemed to tighten. Jack took a step closer. You're weak, Arthur. Before I could respond, Jack turned away, moving with the same unhurried ease as if he had already won. You'll find yourself in a pit of despair soon, he murmured, his voice almost gentle, like a preacher delivering a prophecy rather than a threat. His hand lingered on the doorframe, just for a moment. And when you're ready to commit one of the sins, pray. He glanced over his shoulder, a smirk curling at the edges of his lips. Perhaps, if you're lucky, one of the lords will hear you. The smirk deepened. And then, maybe I'll spare you. He stepped out, the soundproof barrier dissolving behind him as the door hissed shut. I stood there for a moment, rolling his words over in my mind. Then, I smiled. Crushing arrogant enemies was always the most satisfying. Chapter 282, Cecilia Slatemark, 1. He's very arrogant, Luna mused in my mind. I agreed. Let him be, for now, I responded. His arrogance, irritating as it was, wasn't entirely baseless. After all, Jack Blazespout stood above even the Pope of the Order of the Fallen Flame. He wasn't just another noble-born contractor, he was considered the next heavenly demon. Didn't you say there were two plans? Luna pressed. Yes, I confirmed. Jack inherited half of the heavenly demon's soul aspect and his mind aspect. The second got the other half. And his body aspect. A grim thought, but reality nonetheless. Stepping out of the room, I spotted Rose. She was waiting, her auburn hair catching the soft glow of the chandeliers. The moment our eyes met, I smiled. Jack wanted her. Not for himself. But because Evelyn, the Pope of the Order of the Fallen Flame, wanted her. To use her as a weapon. That alone was reason enough for me to keep her far, far away from their reach. Evelyn hadn't come after me directly, which aligned with what Charlotte had told me. Instead, she sent Jack, hoping he'd break me. Make me give Rose over willingly. But Jack knew. That wasn't going to happen. In his mind, I was already marked as the future second hero, the one destined to oppose him. Luna's presence in my soul had only cemented his suspicions. Emperor of the world. Vanquisher of the heavenly demon. The one who had already defeated Lucifer in combat. It made sense. And yet, his logic had gaps. Because he didn't know. I was fateless. And that was why Luna chose me. Jack asking for Rose outright? That wasn't a demand. It was a provocation. A game. A taunt. A way to show me just how much power he had. And for now? He was right. I was still too weak to touch him. He had an entire cult and a dukedom at his back. For now. He's going to be an annoying opponent for you, Luna mused in my mind. A dangerous one, in fact. Perhaps, I responded, pushing the thought aside as I approached Rose. She glanced up at me, her brown eyes meeting mine. I extended my hand, offering a small smile. Do you want to dance again? She asked. I nodded. Before she could take my hand, a third one grabbed mine. Hey, hey. Don't forget about me. Cecilia's voice rang out, playful and demanding all at once. I turned to her, finding the blonde princess grinning up at me, crimson eyes practically glowing with mischief. "Cecilia," I said flatly. She huffed, flipping her golden hair over her shoulder. "Come on, Rose already got the first dance. Seems only fair I get one too." Rose sighed but didn't argue. Cecilia was persistent. I exhaled through my nose before lifting her hand, pressing a light kiss to the back of it. "Then, Princess Cecilia Slatemark, will you grant me this dance?" Her lips curled into a bright smile. No reason for me not to. She pulled me onto the dance floor, the orchestra beginning a new piece, something a little faster, more suited to Cecilia's flair. She moved effortlessly, leading as much as I did, matching my steps with ease. "You're good at this," I commented. "Well, I am a princess. It'd be embarrassing if I wasn't." We twirled through the dance floor, the music weaving around us. But as we danced, I noticed something. Her energy was different. The teasing spark was still there, but beneath it, something hesitant. "Arthur," she said, her voice quieter now. I met her gaze. "Do you actually like me? Or do you just tolerate me because I'm, well, me?" I blinked. Of all things, I hadn't expected that. Cecilia Slatemark was fearless. She carried herself with absolute confidence, throwing herself into everything without hesitation. And yet, here she was, unsure. The dance slowed as I tightened my hold on her waist, leaning in just slightly. "Cecilia," I said, my voice steady. "If I didn't like you, do you think I'd be here, dancing with you?" Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. "I don't tolerate you. I want you here." "You," I paused, watching as she searched my face. "You matter to me." For a split second, she looked almost vulnerable. Then, as if realizing it, she grinned, slipping back into her usual confidence. "Well, of course I do," she said, though her voice was a little breathless. But her fingers curled just a little tighter around mine. And she didn't let go. "And remember," Cecilia murmured, her crimson eyes locking onto mine, "I will do anything you want me to, in any way possible. Use my power as a princess, use me as a tool, wield me however you see fit, just keep me by your side, and be mine. If you do that, I'll give you everything." There was no hesitation in her words. No doubt. Just pure, unwavering devotion. I exhaled softly. "All I want from you is you," I whispered. "If you give me that, I'll be satisfied." Her lips curled upward. "Along with 3 others," she quipped. I didn't retort. Couldn't, really. There was nothing to argue against. Instead, I shifted gears. "If I ask for a favor, will you grant it?" "Yes," she said instantly, her voice quick, eager. "What do you want? A noble title? Money? An artifact? Or me?" I met her gaze. "I want you to monitor Jack Blaispout's movements, particularly toward the Springshaper family." Cecilia tilted her head slightly. "Are you worried about Rose?" I nodded. She clicked her tongue. "But Jack. He seems like a normal high noble kid. A genius, sure, but nothing special like you." My eyes narrowed slightly. Even Cecilia, sharp, perceptive Cecilia, was fooled by him. Jack's ability to hide his true nature wasn't just effective. It was masterful. "Just do this for me, okay?" I said. Cecilia studied me for a moment before grinning. "All right, but only if you do something for me in return." I sighed. "What do you want?" Her lips parted in a slow, teasing smile. "Kiss me. For an hour." I opened my mouth to retort, but my gaze betrayed me, flickering just slightly to her lips. Damn it. Cecilia was stunning. Not just in a regal, refined way, but in a seductive, almost dangerous way. Her red lips, curved in amusement, were a trap, and she knew it. I want to put my lipstick all over you, she whispered as the dance slowed. I swallowed. Then I grabbed her wrist. Cecilia let out a thrilled giggle as I pulled her off the dance floor, her arm linking through mine as we moved. Oh. I never thought I'd see you like this, she teased as I led her into a private room, locking the door behind us. The moment it shut, I turned and pushed her onto the couch, standing over her. She lay there, eyes alight with mischief, lips slightly parted. I exhaled. Some people thought being surrounded by beautiful women was a dream. But when those women were insanely flirty, relentlessly persistent, and completely unafraid of getting what they wanted, it was hell. Because, at the end of the day, damn it, I was still a guy. Drowning in success, are we? Luna quipped in my mind. Seriously, what the hell is wrong with you, you damn Cheelin? I shot back, my patience thinning. She just laughed. But I didn't have time to argue. Because right now, I was too busy kissing Cecilia. Her lips were warm, soft, and utterly relentless. The moment we parted, she was already tugging at my collar, her fingers twisting in the fabric like she had no intention of letting go. Her crimson eyes, always sharp and teasing, were now hazy with something else. Her cheeks were flushed, her breath slightly uneven. And yet, she still smirked. Giving in, Arthur? I smirked back. What do you think? You really think you can handle an hour of me? Before she could respond, I pulled her in again. And this time, I didn't hold back. Perhaps, just perhaps, it was okay to let loose once in a while. Chapter 283, Cecilia Slatemark, 2. His lips left mine just as the last of my breath slipped away, leaving me gasping for air in the dimly lit room. Time seemed to stretch and contract simultaneously, the world narrowing to just the two of us. I exhaled sharply, my chest rising and falling with each uneven breath, my head light from more than just the lack of oxygen. Through my hazy vision, I met Arthur's gaze, smug, unchallenged, and far too damn handsome for his own good. The faint light caught the sharp angles of his face, casting shadows that only enhanced his allure. He mused, grinning down at me, one eyebrow arched in that infuriatingly perfect way. I thought you were confident, princess. Damn him. I swallowed hard, trying to regain some semblance of composure. My body reacted before my mind could catch up, my fingers twitching in his grip, betraying the effect he had on me. The cool silk of the couch beneath me contrasted with the heat radiating from where our bodies touched. Because he had me pinned. Our fingers interlocked, his weight holding me firmly in place, his presence everywhere, surrounding me, consuming me. The scent of his cologne mingled with something uniquely him, making it impossible to think clearly. But this was new. A side of him I hadn't expected, hadn't even imagined in my most secret thoughts. The perfect, composed royal advisor was gone, replaced by something raw and unrestrained. It's only been 30 minutes, you know, he murmured, voice dipping just enough to make my stomach twist into 1,000 knots. His grip tightened slightly, just enough to send a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with fear. My breath caught as his eyes darkened, pupils dilating until there was just a thin ring of azure surrounding endless black. I'm not done with you yet. Those 6 words hung in the air between us, weighted with promise. I sucked in a breath, my heart hammering against my ribs so loudly I was certain he could hear it. My mind scrambled for something, anything, to say that wouldn't reveal just how much power he held over me in that moment. But all I could do was stare at him, transfixed. This dominant side of Arthur. This was unexpected. And yet, I found myself liking it. A little too much. The realization should have frightened me, I, who had spent my entire life fighting for control, for autonomy in a world that sought to dictate my every move. Instead, I felt myself melting into his touch, surrendering in a way I'd never allowed myself before. How do you feel? Arthur's voice dipped low, husky with desire, his breath warm against my ear, sending an electric shiver down my spine that seemed to ignite every nerve ending along the way. Before I could answer, his lips brushed my cheek, soft, teasing, deliberate. The ghost of a touch that promised more. Our eyes locked. In that moment, I saw something shift in his gaze, vulnerability beneath the confidence, a question beneath the demand. He was giving me a choice, even now. And I chose him. My hand moved to the nape of his neck, fingers threading through the silken strands of his hair, pulling him closer. And then, we kissed again. This time, there was nothing tentative about it. His lips claimed mine with a hunger that matched my own, stealing my breath and my thoughts in equal measure. The world dissolved around us, reality narrowing to the points where our bodies connected. Then, the door slid open with a soft whoosh. Arthur shifted instantly, his body shielding mine from view, a protective gesture that sent a flutter through my chest that had nothing to do with our interrupted kiss. Get out. I'm busy. His tone was calm, almost indifferent, like he wasn't currently pinning a princess to a couch, his lips still tingling from mine, his hair mussed from my fingers. The steel in his voice left no room for argument or explanation. Whoever it was didn't hesitate. The door shut again just as quickly as it had opened, followed by hurried footsteps receding down the hallway. I exhaled sharply, suddenly aware of how this would look if word got out. My reputation, already the subject of endless court gossip, would be in tatters. Who was that? Some random noble. Arthur barely spared it a thought, dismissing the intrusion as inconsequential. His attention slid back to me like I was the only thing in the room that mattered, the only thing in the entire mansion worthy of his focus. No one important. I opened my mouth to say something. Focus on me, he murmured, cutting me off as he kissed me again. His fingers skimmed my jaw, tilting my head just enough to deepen it, to make me forget what I was about to say. His thumb traced the outline of my bottom lip, a gentle contrast to the intensity of his gaze. When we finally broke apart, his lips curled into a taunting grin, eyes glittering with challenge and amusement. Didn't you say you wanted to get your lipstick all over me? He raised an eyebrow, his voice dropping to that register that seemed to resonate directly with my pulse. Is the princess chickening out now? A slow heat crept up my neck, spreading across my cheeks in what I knew was a telling blush. The reminder of my earlier boldness, my teasing promise made in a moment of daring, now returned as a challenge. I narrowed my eyes before wrapping an arm around his neck, pulling him in close enough to feel his heart racing against mine. Two could play at this game. Chickening out? I whispered against his lips, letting my breath mingle with his. Do you think that's possible, Nightingale? The nickname, my private name for him, derived from the lullabies he used to sing when we were children, slipped out unbidden. Something flickered in his eyes, recognition, nostalgia, desire, before his expression settled into one of approval. Arthur chuckled, the sound vibrating through his chest and into mine. Good. And then we kissed again. And again. And again. Time blurred, the minutes melting into each other like watercolors on canvas. The world outside our alcove ceased to exist, the ball, the nobles, the political machinations, all of it faded to nothing. By the time we finally stopped, I was breathless, my lips tingling and swollen, my body warm in a way that had nothing to do with the room temperature. My carefully styled hair had come partially undone, strands falling loosely around my face. Arthur leaned back slightly, examining me with undisguised satisfaction before smirking. One hand remained at my waist, the other idly playing with a strand of my hair. Well, 1 hour is up. He dragged a lazy finger over my lips, his smirk widening as he surveyed his handiwork. I think I ended up with more lipstick on me than you did. My face flamed as I took in his appearance, at his completely ruined lips, the smudged red a stark contrast against his usual impeccable composure. His collar was askew, and there was a distinct mark just visible at the edge of his jawline. You were different, I muttered, smoothing my dress with trembling fingers. Arthur exhaled through his nose, a soft sound somewhere between amusement and confession. I can't control myself all the time around you four, he admitted, voice light but laced with meaning that ran deeper than the casual word suggested. And somehow, that single sentence made my face heat even more. The admission that we, could break through his carefully maintained control felt more intimate than the physical acts themselves. "So you won't control yourself?" I asked, hearing the hopeful note in my voice and unable to disguise it. "Not as much," he exhaled, running a hand through his disheveled hair. His expression softened, becoming more thoughtful. I realized just how self-centered I had been. Sort of. A shadow of vulnerability crossed his face, gone almost before I could register it. "Anyway, I will be proper now, so continue to be mine." His azure gaze dug into me as he caressed my cheek, his touch gentle now, reverent almost. The smile on his face made my heart race as I gulped, caught between the desire to maintain this intimacy and the awareness of our responsibilities waiting beyond the door. Then I smiled, allowing myself this moment of honesty, of openness. "I want that more than you," I said as I hugged him, breathing in his scent, committing this moment to memory. The solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart against my ear, a counterpoint to the chaos of my own emotions. "I know," he said simply, the words rumbling through his chest. His arms tightened around me briefly before we both got up, the practical reality of our situation reasserting itself. I glanced at the time on my phone, noting with surprise how much time had passed. "The event is probably about to end now," I said as he nodded, already straightening his clothing with practiced efficiency. I turned toward the small mirror on the wall, assessing the damage. My lipstick was beyond salvation, my hair falling in loose waves where it had escaped its pins. I looked. Thoroughly kissed. Arthur appeared behind me in the reflection, his eyes meeting mine. The intensity in them made my breath catch all over again. His fingers brushed mine, a brief touch filled with promise before he stepped back. "After you, Princess." Chapter 284, Rose Springshaper, 3. "Wow, I never imagined you had that in you," Luna mused in my mind as I walked with Cecilia. Her tone was half amused, half impressed. "Is that what happens when you let go?" "Damn. I was worried your harem was going to drain you, but honestly, they might not even be able to keep up with you." "God, Luna, shut up," I groaned. "Jokes aside," she continued, completely ignoring me, "now you can actually assert yourself. Dominate. Conquer. Expand. Take more harem members, Arthur, take over the world." "Luna, I swear. My plan is solid," she pressed on, undeterred. "We've got Rose, Cecilia, Rachel, Serafina, Reka, Anne." "Why is Reka even on the list?" I interrupted, exasperated. "I don't like her like that." "She's pretty though, right?" "So? Don't you want her?" "No." Silence. Then Luna clicked her tongue. "TSK. Wasteful." I sighed, tuning her out as she continued to ramble about missed opportunities and expanding my empire. She had become a lot more talkative lately. Before, she only ever spoke when something specifically caught her interest, usually battle-related. But now, she initiated most of our conversations. It was a sign. A sign that she was more comfortable with me. More attached. Which was great. But it was also very, very annoying. "You seem distracted," Cecilia noted, her crimson eyes flicking to me with curiosity. I sighed. "It's nothing." "Oh." She arched an eyebrow. "Is it a secret you can't tell me?" That made me pause. I met her gaze, reading the unspoken challenge in it. "No," I said simply. "If you want to know, ask me." Luna was a secret to the world, because right now, I was still too weak to handle the weight of being labeled the future emperor of the world, which everyone would assume since I had Luna. But not to Cecilia. Not to the three others, either. They were the only ones I trusted with everything. Cecilia tilted her head, a playful smirk tugging at her lips. "Then tell me. You really don't hold back, do you?" I murmured. "Of course not." What kind of princess reigns in her curiosity? I shook my head but pulled her closer, lowering my voice as I leaned in. Then, I whispered into her ear, words wrapped in manna, ensuring no one else would ever hear them. Her body tensed. Then, her eyes widened, flickering up to meet mine. And then, she grinned. No wonder, she mused, amusement laced with something sharper. It all makes sense now. Are you planning to tell the others? If they wish to know, I said. This isn't something I want to hide from any of you. Cecilia tilted her head, studying me. You trust us that much? Her voice was quieter now. Thanks, Arthur. For trusting me. Despite everything at the beginning. I smirked. Don't worry. I'll get my revenge. Her eyes narrowed. Oh. And how exactly? I leaned in just slightly, just enough to make her breath hitch. Wait and see, princess. Before Cecilia could retort, a soft glow caught my attention. Right between us, a blue rose sprouted from the ground, blooming with an ethereal shimmer. Its petals unfurled like liquid sapphire, glowing faintly against the ambient lighting of the ballroom. I sighed. Of course. I turned my head just in time to see Rose approaching, her auburn hair flowing behind her, her eyes, normally warm, now narrowed in playful annoyance. She stopped right in front of us, crossing her arms as she pouted. Arthur. Rose. You've been hogging him, she accused Cecilia, flicking her gaze toward her before looking back at me. I let you have the dance. I even let you disappear together, but now? She stepped closer, reaching out and taking my hand firmly, her fingers curling around mine. You're spending time with me now. Cecilia exhaled in amusement. Oh. Possessive, are we? Rose lifted her chin. I share, but I also claim. Cecilia smirked. Fair enough. I sighed again, but I didn't resist as Rose gently but purposefully pulled me away from Cecilia. Honestly, Arthur, she muttered as she led me toward the balcony, away from the swirling crowd. You need to prioritize better. Me first. I let her drag me along, my lips twitching into a smirk. And here I thought you weren't the jealous type. Rose glanced over her shoulder, her brown eyes glinting. I'm not. Then, she squeezed my hand just a little tighter. But you're mine too, Arthur. So act like it. Don't worry, I didn't forget, I murmured, voice low as I leaned in just slightly. You're mine, Rose. I will never let you go. Her breath hitched. For a moment, she just stared at me, her brown eyes wide, shimmering under the soft glow of the ballroom lights. Then, a warm flush crept up her cheeks, and her lips curled into something between a smirk and a genuine, unguarded smile. Looks like I got myself a possessive man, she teased, but there was no mistaking the happiness in her voice. I squeezed her hand. You're okay with that? She bit her lip. I wouldn't be here if I wasn't. I grinned. Then that's all that matters. She exhaled softly before shaking her head, the amusement never leaving her face. Anyway, the event is over. I nodded. Then, let's go somewhere, I said smoothly. Her brow arched. My father's home, Arthur. I chuckled, shaking my head. Relax, I'm not trying to get you in trouble. I just want to show you something cool. Cool. The word sounded foreign on her tongue, a commoner's slang that didn't quite fit with her aristocratic upbringing. Ouroboros. Her expression shifted slightly. Curiosity sparked in her eyes, brightening them with renewed interest. Your guild? I nodded, watching as she processed the invitation, weighing her curiosity against propriety. Before she could respond, a familiar voice cut in, smooth as silk and just as luxurious. Wait, you're going to Ouroboros? Cecilia strolled over, her signature smirk tugging at the corner of her lips. She moved with effortless grace, as if the very air parted to accommodate her passage. You can come too, if you want, I said, extending the invitation naturally, watching as something complex flickered across Rose's features. Cecilia sighed dramatically, the sound theatrical yet somehow sincere. Tempting. But no can do. I've got some princess duties to handle, boring politics and all that nonsense. She flicked an invisible speck from her sleeve. The Eastern Alliance delegation is pushing for renegotiation of the maritime treaties. Father expects me to smooth things over. Responsibilities, huh? I said, understanding the weight behind her casual dismissal. Yeah. She waved me off, the gesture imperial and dismissive. Then, without warning, she grabbed my tie, tugged me down slightly, and placed a quick kiss on my cheek, the touch of her lips leaving a lingering warmth. Have fun with your guild, Arthur. I'll be busy keeping this empire from falling apart. Then, with a final wink, she turned and sauntered off, the crowd parting for her automatically, years of conditioning making them yield to imperial presence. She slipped into her sleek self-driving car, the door sliding shut behind her with a soft pneumatic hiss. The vehicle pulled away from the estate, disappearing into the cityscape, its lights blending with the thousand others illuminating Avalon's skyline. Rose huffed beside me, a sound of mixed exasperation and reluctant fondness. She's so dramatic. Takes one to know one. She shot me a look, eyes narrowing dangerously, but she didn't argue. Instead, she linked her arm through mine and leaned in slightly, her warmth a pleasant contrast to the cool night air. All right then, show me this guild of yours, Mr. Nightingale. I smirked, feeling a surge of anticipation at the thought of introducing Rose to that other part of my life, that sanctuary away from imperial politics and noble machinations. With pleasure. We stepped outside, the grand facade of the imperial palace rising behind us, its spires reaching toward the star-studded sky. A few moments later, Rose's self-driving car arrived, its sleek design marking it as a luxury model reserved for the highest echelons of society. The doors slid open with a soft chime, and we climbed in, settling into the plush interior. The car's AI greeted us with a respectful tone, awaiting instructions. I glanced at Rose as the car took off, gliding smoothly into the traffic flow. She was watching the view, the soft glow of Avalon reflecting in her eyes, turning them into pools of liquid amber. The technological marvels of the city, the floating gardens, the anti-gravity platforms, all captured in her gaze. She looked excited, her earlier possessiveness giving way to genuine curiosity. And as we moved deeper into the city, toward the hidden headquarters of Ouroboros, I found myself anticipating her reaction, wanting to share this part of myself with her. Chapter 285, Rose Springshaper, 4. Arthur and I stood before a towering structure, sleek and imposing, the very image of ambition made tangible. The building rose at least 30 stories high, its obsidian-like exterior reflecting the city lights in mesmerizing patterns. Above us, emblazoned on the facade, was the unmistakable symbol of a black serpent devouring its own tail, a sigil as ancient as time itself. Ouroboros. A symbol of infinity. Of eternal cycles. And of unrelenting ambition. The emblem pulsed with a subtle blue glow, visible even against the night sky of Avalon. Mana-infused, no doubt, a little touch of magic to complement the technological marvel of the structure itself. Around us, the business district hummed with the late-night activity typical of a city that never truly slept. Fitting, I mused, my eyes tracing the sleek metallic curves of the insignia. The emblem seemed alive somehow, the eternal snake forever consuming itself, forever renewing. Arthur glanced at me, his lips curling into a knowing smirk that made my heart flutter traitorously. Well, I do plan for this guild to sit on the throne, after all. I blinked, the casual way he mentioned something so monumental catching me off guard. The throne? I turned to him fully, my heart skipping slightly at the weight behind his words. The night breeze tugged at loose strands of my hair as I studied his face. You don't mean that throne? He met my gaze evenly, azure eyes steady in the glow of the city lights. You know I do. His voice was steady, calm, assured. As if claiming the guild throne, the position coveted by thousands of guilds across all continents, was simply a matter of time rather than possibility. And somehow, standing there with him, the night air cool against my skin and his confidence radiating like a tangible force, I believed him. A security scanner hummed softly as we approached the entrance, recognizing Arthur immediately. The massive glass doors slid open with barely a whisper, revealing the guild's interior. A receptionist greeted us as we stepped inside, bowing with clear respect. She was young, perhaps our age, with sharp features and alert eyes that missed nothing. "Welcome back, Guild Master Nightingale," she said, her voice professionally pleasant. Then, with a curious glance at me, "And welcome to Ouroboros, Lady Leopold." I tried not to show my surprise at being recognized. Arthur returned a polite nod before leading me further in, his hand resting lightly against the small of my back, guiding me. "Everyone knows who you are, Rose," he murmured, correctly interpreting my reaction. "Duke Leopold's daughter, heir to Vokert Industries. Not to mention." His voice dropped lower, mine. Heat crept up my neck at the possessive note in his voice, but I kept my composure. "Presumptuous, aren't you?" He merely chuckled in response, the sound sending a pleasant shiver down my spine. The interior was pristine, all clean lines, polished steel, and softly glowing blue holodisplays showcasing real-time guild activity. The air buzzed faintly with the hum of high-end tech, monitoring everything: missions, finances, logistics. Translucent screens showed maps of various territories, mission areas marked in red, blue, and green depending on their status. "Not many members around," Arthur remarked as we moved through the surprisingly empty halls. Our footsteps echoed slightly against the polished floor. "Most are out on raids. We need victories to establish ourselves, especially since we're still just a bronze rank guild." "Makes sense," I replied, trailing my fingers along a nearby railing, feeling the cool metal beneath my touch. Every guild, no matter its potential, had to prove itself. It was the way of things, meritocracy in its purest form. Bronze to silver, silver to gold, and then the platinum ranks, Arthur finished, a gleam in his eye. "Where the real power begins." We passed several training rooms, their doors ajar to reveal state-of-the-art simulation equipment. One room contained what looked like a miniature forest, complete with holographic monsters prowling between trees. Another held a desert landscape, the simulated heat almost palpable even from the doorway. "Impressive tech," I noted, genuinely surprised. "This is extensive for a bronze guild." Arthur's lips twitched. "I have investors." "Clearly," I murmured, wondering just who had backed him. This level of technology wasn't cheap, wasn't even accessible to most mid-tier guilds. Someone with serious connections had put their faith in Arthur Nightingale. We entered an elevator at the end of the hall, its interior lined with mirrors that reflected us infinitely, another subtle nod to the guild's namesake. Arthur pressed his palm against a scanner, and the elevator began its smooth ascent. "The upper floors are administrative," he explained as we rose. "My office, meeting rooms, strategy planning. Lower levels are for training, equipment, and common areas for members." I nodded, watching the floor numbers tick upward. "And the basement levels?" His eyes met mine in the mirrored wall. "What makes you think there are basement levels?" I smiled. "There always are." A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Perhaps someday I'll show you." Soon, we reached the top floor. The elevator doors opened silently, revealing a spacious corridor adorned with subtle art pieces, most featuring the guild's emblem in various artistic interpretations. Outside what was clearly Arthur's office, a man stood waiting. Tall, neatly dressed, and exuding quiet efficiency, he turned toward us as we approached. He was older than us, perhaps in his late 20s, with sharp features and eyes that seemed to calculate a dozen variables at once. His posture was perfect, his attire impeccable. Everything about him screamed precision. "Guild Master," he greeted Arthur with a slight bow. Then, with the same measured politeness, "Lady Rose." "Good day, Elias, Arthur smiled, his tone lighter. The familiarity in his voice suggested a relationship built on mutual respect. Everything going well? As expected, Elias Vance replied smoothly, extending a tablet for Arthur to review. The Eastern Raid team reported successful completion of their mission. Minimal injuries, maximum efficiency. The Western team encountered some complications, but nothing beyond their capabilities. There was competence in his tone. No wasted words. No hesitation. Just pure, distilled efficiency. The financial projections for this quarter are promising, he continued. If current trends hold, we'll see a 27% increase in revenue compared to our initial forecasts. Arthur nodded, scanning the tablet before handing it back. And the Blackwater contract? Secured this morning, Elias confirmed. Terms exactly as you specified. I won't keep you long, he added, clearly sensing Arthur's desire to show me around without an audience. Arthur nodded. Appreciate it. With that, Elias bowed once more and departed, his footsteps fading as he walked toward another section of the floor. We stepped into Arthur's office, a space that was minimalistic yet purposeful. A large desk fashioned from some dark, polished wood dominated one side, complete with an advanced holodisplay currently in sleep mode. A sleek seating area occupied another corner, with comfortable-looking chairs arranged around a low table. The walls were lined with tactical maps and documents, some physical and others projected onto special surfaces. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of Avalon's skyline, the city sprawling beneath us like a carpet of light and shadow. The office itself was illuminated by ambient lighting that seemed to have no specific source, casting everything in a soft, even glow. As I took in the room, Arthur leaned back against his desk and crossed his arms, watching me with that particular intensity that always made my skin tingle. That was Elias Vance, he explained casually. My secretary. He runs most of the guild since I'm busy. You know, getting stronger, dealing with the academy, and not dying. I raised an eyebrow, moving to examine a particularly intricate map of the Eastern Territories pinned to one wall. And Callie? Vice leader, he shrugged. But she's busy too, so Elias does most of the actual work. I nodded, impressed despite myself. If he's running an entire bronze rank guild mostly on his own, he must be incredibly competent. Oh, he is, Arthur confirmed, watching as I traced the border of a disputed territory with my fingertip. He's not much of a fighter, but his brain? Easily worth an army. I turned, leaning against the wall and crossing my arms to mirror his posture. Where did you find someone like that? He found me, actually, Arthur admitted. Approached me after I founded the guild. Said he saw potential and wanted to be part of it from the ground up. Smart man, I mused. High risk, but potentially high reward. Arthur's eyes gleamed. Very smart. Oxford educated. Could have worked anywhere, but chose a fledgling guild instead. I wandered toward the window, gazing out at the city. Avalon at night was truly spectacular, a testament to human ingenuity and magical advancement. From this height, I could see the floating gardens in the distance, their glowing flora illuminating the night like earthbound stars. Did you bring me just to show me this? I asked, turning back to face him. Because well, this isn't much of a tour to begin with. Of course not, Arthur murmured as he pushed away from his desk and sank into his chair, a sleek, high-backed thing that looked both comfortable and imposing. He pressed something on his desk, and the windows immediately tinted darker, offering us privacy from any potential observers in neighboring buildings. I barely had time to tilt my head before he extended a hand toward me, an unmistakable invitation in his eyes. Come here, he said softly. I hesitated for just a moment, feeling a familiar flutter in my chest. Then I crossed the distance between us, allowing him to pull me in, effortlessly guiding me onto his lap. Arthur, I started, my voice faltering as warmth flooded my face. The situation felt both intimate and professional in a way that was hard to reconcile. Shoo, he whispered against my ear, his breath tickling my skin. I want to show you something, okay? Chapter 286, Rose Springshaper, 5. I nodded, though focusing was becoming an issue. His arms curled around me, one resting lightly against my waist, the other reaching for his desk. Every movement, every slight shift, sent a new wave of awareness through me. I could feel his breath against my neck. His chest, firm and steady, pressed against my back. The subtle scent of his cologne, something woodsy and expensive, enveloped me. Snap out of it, Rose. I scolded myself, shutting my eyes for a second to recenter. I was Marquis Springshaper's daughter, heir to Vockert Industries. I couldn't be reduced to a flustered schoolgirl just because Arthur Nightingale had pulled me onto his lap. Except, apparently, I could. Then, a bright blue glow flooded my vision. The holographic display came to life, expanding around us in intricate layers of data, graphs, and schematics. Three-dimensional projections filled the air, rotating slowly to showcase complex logistics chains, resource allocation models, and what appeared to be geological surveys. What is this? I whispered, momentarily stunned by the sheer magnitude of information on the screen. My business instincts kicked in immediately, eyes darting from projection to projection, trying to piece together the overall picture. Something I need your help with, Arthur murmured, his voice calm, too calm, considering the classified nature of what I was seeing. This wasn't just guild business. This was something far more ambitious. His arm tightened slightly around my stomach, drawing me in as he navigated the hollow display with his free hand, bringing certain projections forward while minimizing others. I barely registered his movements. My attention was locked on the floating projections before me, particularly on what appeared to be a detailed map of the Ashen Territories, the most resource-rich and politically volatile region in the eastern continent. This. I hesitated, piecing together the fragmented data, business acumen kicking in as I recognized supply chain models and distribution networks that would make even my father raise an eyebrow in appreciation. You want Vockert's help with this? Arthur nodded, his chin brushing against my shoulder with the movement. I frowned, mind racing as I processed the implications. Arthur. Shouldn't a bigger guild be handling something like this? Technically, yes, he admitted, fingers tapping the interface with precise control, bringing up another layer of data, this one showing projected profit margins that were, frankly, staggering. But I don't want to give it up. I turned my head slightly to look at him, our faces now inches apart. Give it up? His azure eyes gleamed with quiet conviction. If I take this to a larger guild, sure, they'd handle it. But then they'd own it. The profits, the connections, the influence, it would all go to them. His voice hardened slightly. And I'd just be the junior member who brought them a good lead. I studied him for a moment, understanding dawning. This wasn't just about business. This was about establishing himself, about creating a foundation solid enough to support his seemingly impossible ambitions. But still, it's dangerous, I quipped, my eyes scanning the massive projection before us, focusing on the statistical models that predicted various risk factors. The Ashen Territories are practically a war zone. And how exactly do you plan on getting access to this place in the first place? Arthur chuckled, the sound low and annoyingly confident. Did you forget about Rachel? Ah. Of course. With her, I don't need to worry about access, he continued, I just need Vockert's help with the processing and distribution. I tapped my fingers against the armrest of his chair, considering his words, the complex business proposal taking shape in my mind. You're not targeting the West? You could use Callie's connections. Callie Malekith. Daughter of the one of Western Continent's most powerful families. The fact that Arthur had somehow managed to recruit her as his guild's vice leader was still something that boggled my mind. West is locked down when it comes to this, he said, shaking his head, bringing up yet another projection that showed failed business ventures in the region. That's the reason Vockert hasn't been able to break into that continent, isn't it? I sighed. He was right. The Western Continent, ruled by necromancers and the infamous Ashbluff family, was a fortress, nearly impenetrable when it came to foreign business interests. My father's company, Vockert, had tried to expand there multiple times, but every attempt had been blocked by a combination of protectionist policies and outright hostility. But still, I muttered, chewing on my lower lip, a habit I'd never quite managed to break. If no one else has done this before, doesn't that mean it's too dangerous? Arthur leaned back in his chair, completely unbothered by concerns that would keep most business magnates awake at night. I have a solution. I raised an eyebrow, skepticism evident. Do you, now? He smirked, that infuriatingly confident expression that made me want to both kiss him and push him out of his chair. I always have a solution, Rose. But don't worry, this isn't happening now, this is for later. I wanted to show you early because I want to set up a preliminary contract with Vokert for something else. I narrowed my eyes, instantly on alert. When someone pivots like that in a business conversation, it usually means the second proposal is the real aim. Something else? A smaller side project. Go on. I kept my voice neutral, though curiosity piqued my interest. I need a zombie princess. I blinked, certain I'd misheard. A what? Arthur's face remained perfectly neutral, not a hint of humor or uncertainty. A zombie princess. I tilted my head, studying him for a moment, trying to determine if this was some sort of bizarre joke. The term wasn't completely unknown to me, a rare and powerful undead classification in the Western continent, beings who retained their intelligence and gained significant magical abilities after death. We can't make one, I said slowly, testing the waters. No, he agreed, still frustratingly calm, but we can turn someone into one. I waited, the silence stretching between us like a physical thing. He waited, patient as always when it came to his schemes. Then, he continued far too casually. I want Callie to become a zombie princess. I stared at him. I stared at him for a long time, trying to process the sheer audacity of what he was suggesting. Callie Malekith was the daughter of one of Western Continent's most powerful families. A powerful dark MGE in her own right. And Arthur wanted to turn her into an undead being. The political ramifications alone were enough to make my head spin. Not to mention the ethical considerations, the magical requirements, the risks involved. Then, I smiled, the expression probably too sweet to be genuine. Arthur, I said, maintaining that sugary tone, it seems my boy has gone completely insane. The corner of his mouth twitched upward. Crazy, huh? He asked as I nodded emphatically. I began to speak, ready to list the dozen reasons why this plan was absolute madness, why it could start an international incident, why it might very well get us all killed. But before I could get another word out, he pulled me in. And kissed me. Deeply. One hand cradled the back of my neck, the other at my waist, holding me steady as his lips moved against mine with practiced skill. All my carefully prepared arguments dissolved instantly, replaced by a rush of warmth that spread from my lips to the tips of my toes. After a long time of deep kissing, long enough that my thoughts scattered like leaves in a storm, he let me go as I panted, struggling to remember what we'd been discussing. Art, I began again, determined to get back to the topic, to tell him exactly why turning Callie Malekith into a zombie princess was perhaps the worst idea in recorded history. He pulled me in to kiss me again, effectively cutting off my protest. This time his kiss was softer, more teasing, but no less effective at derailing my thoughts. Damn it, I don't want to admit, but this is a good strategy to shut me up, I thought hazily, knowing I should pull away but finding myself entirely unwilling to do so. When he finally released me again, I was breathless, my heart racing and my thoughts in disarray. I pressed a hand against his chest, creating a small space between us. You can't just kiss me every time I'm about to call you out on your ridiculous plans, I said, trying to sound stern despite my flushed cheeks and quickened breathing. Arthur's eyes gleamed with mischief. Can't I? No, I insisted, though my protest lacked conviction. And this plan of yours, it's madness, Arthur. Even if Callie agreed, which I seriously doubt, the process would be dangerous, potentially fatal, and definitely illegal in most jurisdictions. He nodded, as if I'd simply confirmed something he already knew. All true. But necessary. Chapter 287, Phase 1-1. It seems your thinking is shallow, I said, watching Rose squirm in my lap. Her weight was pleasant against me, a warmth I'd grown increasingly fond of. Shallow, she repeated, tilting her head slightly. A strand of auburn hair fell across her cheek as she frowned. Arthur, I don't. I flicked her forehead, making her flinch. She scowled, rubbing the spot with delicate fingers. Am I stupid enough to do what you're thinking, Rose? I hope not, she muttered, her brown eyes locking onto my own, searching for something, reassurance, perhaps, or the madness she clearly suspected lurked beneath my plans. But then what do you mean by zombie princess? I sighed, leaning back in my chair. The material creaked slightly beneath our combined weight. I suppose I should have phrased it better. Leaning forward, I kissed her forehead before tapping a command into my desk. The holographic interface hummed beneath my fingertips, connecting instantly. Elias, I said smoothly, ask Callie to come to my office. I ended the call before he could respond, knowing he'd handle it with his usual efficiency. The man never wasted time on unnecessary confirmations. Rose opened her mouth to protest again, but I simply pulled her closer, wrapping my arms around her in a way that left no room for argument. She huffed but didn't resist, though I could feel her trying very hard to act annoyed instead of flustered. Her heartbeat quickened against my chest, betraying her. This is completely inappropriate, she muttered, though she made no real attempt to escape. I'm trying to have a serious conversation about your apparently insane plans, and you're just... Just what? I asked innocently, enjoying the way her cheeks colored. You know exactly what, she replied, attempting to sound stern and failing miserably. A few minutes passed, filled with Rose's half-hearted attempts to maintain a professional demeanor while still sitting on my lap. I could practically hear the war between her dignity and her comfort playing out in her head. Then the door slid open with a soft pneumatic hiss. Callie strode in, hands stuffed into the pockets of her dark coat, already exuding the exasperation of someone who had seen too much nonsense in a single lifetime. Her silver hair caught the ambient light, contrasting sharply with the darkness of her attire. She sighed, her eyes still closed as if she could block out whatever inevitable chaos awaited her. What do you want, Arthur? Then, she opened her eyes, deep violet, a trademark of the Ash Bluff bloodline. She saw Rose. She saw where Rose was. Her lips curled into a knowing smirk as she leaned against the doorframe, one ankle crossed over the other in a casual pose that somehow still managed to exude aristocratic disdain. Did you summon me just to show off your lovemaking skills? Rose instantly turned red, pushing at my chest with weak, ineffective resistance. We weren't, I wasn't. Of course not, I replied, rolling my eyes. I have a task for you. Callie's smirk didn't fade, but she folded her arms across her chest, her posture shifting from casual amusement to wary interest. What kind of task? I grinned, enjoying the moment before I dropped my little bombshell. Become a zombie princess for me. Callie blinked, the smirk sliding off her face like water off glass. Then, she smiled. A slow, deliberate smile that never quite reached her eyes. The kind of smile that had probably preceded violence in the Ash Bluff household for generations. Then, she opened her mouth. What the hell is this bastard saying now? Damn, I thought, weren't you supposed to be a noble lady? Hey. I know we signed an oath and everything, but that doesn't mean you get to kill me and turn me into some disgusting undead abomination. Callie shouted, jabbing a finger at me as if she were trying to ward off an exorcism. Her voice rose in pitch, echoing slightly in the spacious office. I agree, Rose added, arms crossed, her brow furrowed into a perfect picture of disapproval. Arthur, what the hell? I sighed, rubbing my temples. Sometimes being surrounded by beautiful women wasn't worth the headache of dealing with their assumptions. God, both of you are dumb. Two sets of eyes blinked at me in perfect unison. Excuse me? Rose and Callie said at the same time, voices equally unimpressed. The stereo effect would have been amusing if I weren't so exasperated. Right, of course they thought they knew what I was talking about. Rose's father ran Vokert, Slate Mark Empire's largest necromancer conglomerate, and Callie? Callie was the daughter of one of the most powerful families of the Western continent. If anyone should have known what a zombie princess was, it was them. And yet, they were both completely wrong. Listen, I said, exhaling slowly, trying to gather my patience. Making Callie a zombie princess doesn't mean she has to die. I paused, then smiled. Why would I kill such a good such a good person? Callie stared at me flatly, her violet eyes unblinking. You were definitely about to say tool. I have no idea what you're talking about, I said, looking away, suddenly finding the corner of my office fascinating. What exactly do you mean by a zombie princess, then? Rose asked, still looking wary, but I could see curiosity beginning to replace her initial alarm. I leaned back, propping my feet up on the desk, the picture of casual confidence. Callie gets all the perks, enhanced regeneration, command over the undead, massively increased physical abilities, without the whole rotting flesh, corpse smell, oops I forgot to breathe bit. Both of them stared at me, dumbfounded. The silence stretched long enough that I could hear the faint hum of the building's environmental systems. How is that even possible? Rose finally asked, voice laced with skepticism. As the daughter of a necromancy magnate, she knew enough to understand why my proposal should be impossible. I grinned, wide and shameless. Well, I said, stretching my arms behind my head, I'm a genius. They both sighed in perfect synchrony, the kind of exhausted sigh that people only make when they've completely given up on receiving a reasonable explanation. So if this is a future plan, why are you bringing it up now? Rose asked, shifting slightly. She tried to move off my lap. Tried. I didn't let go. She flushed deeper as she squirmed, pushing against my arm in a futile attempt to free herself. Arthur, this is serious. Let me go. Cute. Because I can do the first step now, I said casually, tightening my grip just a little to watch her reaction. She froze, her cheeks burning a delicious shade of crimson. Callie, meanwhile, was watching us with the unimpressed look of someone who had witnessed far too much nonsense in far too short a time. Her arms remained firmly crossed, one eyebrow raised. And what exactly is the first step? It won't do much yet, I admitted, finally releasing Rose, who immediately slid off my lap and onto her feet, smoothing her dress with affected dignity. But it'll give you enhanced regeneration and the ability to summon zombies. So you'll get stronger, not by a huge margin, but enough to matter. And, before you ask, no, you won't die and yes, you'll still be human. Callie's eyes narrowed, suspicion evident in the tightness of her jaw. And you need us for this, why? Because, I said, rising from my chair to pace slowly around my desk, I need to stabilize the process. If I use your gift, Rose's gift, Reika's gift, and mine together, I can balance everything out properly. Rose pinched the bridge of her nose, a gesture she'd picked up from her father. And what's stopping you from completely ruining Callie's body? Me, I grinned, pointing a thumb at my chest. Callie scowled, her lips drawing into a thin line. That doesn't fill me with confidence. I ignored her skepticism, knowing she'd agree eventually. Callie was many things, stubborn, violent, occasionally psychopathic, but stupid wasn't one of them. She knew power when she saw it, and this was an opportunity she wouldn't pass up. Instead, I tapped my desk, calling Elias again. Get Reika in here. A few minutes later, the door slid open with a soft whoosh, and a familiar head of violet hair peeked through. You called for me? Reika asked hesitantly, peering inside like she wasn't sure if she was interrupting something questionable. Her eyes, a remarkable shade of amber, scanned the room cautiously. Come in, I said, gesturing her forward. She stepped inside, immediately spotting Callie and giving her a polite bow. Vice leader, she murmured respectfully. Then, her gaze flickered to me. And then to Rose. Her cheeks turned red instantly, a lovely compliment to her violet hair. I saw the exact moment she registered the position Rose was in, now standing beside my desk, trying to look composed despite her still flushed face and slightly mussed hair. She looked away quickly, avoiding my eyes like they were some kind of forbidden sight, her entire posture radiating flustered confusion. Rose, of course, only got more embarrassed in response, clearing her throat and focusing intently on straightening an already straight sleeve. I smirked, enjoying their discomfort perhaps more than I should have. "All right, Rekha," I said, stretching my arms behind my head. "Time to get to work." Rekha shifted nervously, still not quite meeting anyone's eyes. "What kind of work, exactly?" "We're going to make Callie stronger," I said simply. "I need your gift." Understanding dawned on Rekha's face, followed immediately by apprehension. "My gift? You want me to transcribe a curse?" "Not just any curse," I clarified. "A very specific sequence that I've developed. One that will lay the groundwork for Callie to eventually become a zombie princess." Rekha's eyes widened. "A zombie, but that's not what you think," I interrupted, holding up a hand. "We've already been through this with Rose and Callie. No death involved, no actual undeath. Just the benefits." Chapter 288, Phase 1, 2. Rekha looked unconvinced, but she nodded slowly. Her gift, Cursed Script, allowed her to transcribe curses directly into a person's body, altering their very essence. This gift was used to temporarily boost mana rank, but it could be used in a different way as well when mixed with Rose's paradox. "I'll need your help too, Rose," I said, turning to her. "Your paradox gift is essential to create the closed space where reality can be manipulated without outside interference." Rose nodded, her earlier embarrassment giving way to professional interest. Her gift allowed her to create localized pockets where the laws of reality became flexible, malleable to her will. Within those spaces, she could bend causality itself, though the strain of maintaining such distortions limited how far she could push. "And my gift?" Callie asked, leaning against the wall with forced casualness. "What does Dark Embrace contribute to this little experiment?" "Your connection to Deep Dark," I explained. "We're not turning you undead, but we are borrowing from that spectrum of power. Your gift lets you channel and control those energies naturally. It's the perfect conduit." Callie nodded slowly, considering. "And your gift?" Rose asked, eyes narrowed slightly. "How does Lucent Harmony fit into this?" I smiled. My gift had always been the least flashy of the four, but perhaps the most essential. I balance everything. Without me, the other three gifts would tear Callie apart, quite literally. I keep the energies harmonized, ensure they sync instead of conflict. The room fell silent as they all processed what I was suggesting. Using four gifts in conjunction wasn't just ambitious, it was practically unheard of. The potential for disaster was enormous. So, I clapped my hands together. "Shall we begin?" "Wait," Rose interjected. "Just like that? No preparation, no safety measures, nothing?" I gestured around my office. "Why do you think I called you all here? This room is already prepared." I tapped a sequence on my desk, and the lights dimmed slightly as hidden panels in the walls slid open, revealing intricate runic arrays etched in luminescent material. The floor beneath us hummed softly as similar patterns activated, creating a complex matrix of magical circuits. "I'd been planning this for months," I said, allowing myself a small, satisfied smile. "The preparations were completed weeks ago. All I needed was to get you three in the same place at the same time." Callie whistled, genuinely impressed despite herself. "You sneaky bastard." "Always," I agreed cheerfully. Rose still looked concerned. "And you're absolutely certain this won't harm Callie?" "As certain as I can be," I said honestly. "There's always risk with something this experimental, but I've run the calculations hundreds of times. The probability of success is acceptable." Acceptable? Callie repeated, eyebrow raised. That's not exactly comforting, Rose muttered. It wasn't meant to be, I replied. It was meant to be honest. This is experimental magic on a level few have attempted. There are risks. But the rewards. I turned to Callie. The rewards are worth it. Callie pushed away from the wall, straightening her posture. All right. I'm in. What do I need to do? Stand in the center, I directed, pointing to a circular pattern on the floor that had begun to glow a soft blue. Rose, take the north position. Reka, east. I'll take west. They moved to their positions without further argument, each standing on a glowing marker in the floor. The room's lighting dimmed further as the runic arrays brightened, casting an ethereal blue glow across everyone's features. Rose, begin, I instructed. Create the paradox space. Rose closed her eyes, her face serene with concentration. She extended her hands, palms facing inward as if holding an invisible sphere. The air between her hands shimmered, distorting slightly as reality began to flex under her will. Slowly, the distortion expanded, spreading outward in a perfect sphere until it encompassed the entire ritual space that was now full of blue roses. The air felt heavier, thicker somehow, as if we were suddenly underwater. Sound dampened, and the colors in the room shifted subtly, everything taking on a slightly surreal quality. Perfect, I murmured. Reka, prepare your script. Reka nodded, raising her hands. Her fingertips began to glow with amber light, intricate symbols appearing in the air before her like burning calligraphy. She moved with practiced precision, each gesture creating new characters that floated and swirled around her. Use the pattern I showed you, I reminded her. Focus on integration, not dominance. She nodded again, her face a mask of concentration as she continued to write in the air, creating a complex lattice of cursed script. The symbols floated toward Callie, orbiting her slowly, waiting to be inscribed. Callie, I said, channel your gift. Draw on deep dark, but don't shape it. Just let it flow. Callie closed her eyes, her breathing slowing. A subtle darkness seemed to gather around her, not visible exactly, but perceptible as a weight, a gravitational pull that wasn't physical. The temperature around her dropped slightly, frost forming on the floor at her feet. Good, I encouraged. Now hold it steady. Finally, I activated my own gift. Lucent harmony spread from my body like ripples in a pond, invisible but tangible. Where it touched the other's energies, it soothed them, aligned them, preventing the natural rejection that would occur when different magical forces interacted. Now, I commanded. Rose, constrict the paradox. Reka, inscribe the script. Callie, cycle the energy through your core. They moved in perfect synchrony, as if we'd practiced this 100 times instead of never before. Rose's hands drew closer together, compressing the paradox space, intensifying its effects. Reality bent further, the laws of physics becoming suggestions rather than rules. Reka's floating script accelerated, spinning faster around Callie before suddenly diving inward, each symbol sinking beneath her skin like ink in water. Where they entered, brief lines of amber light traced across her body before fading. Callie gasped as the script entered her, her back arching slightly. The death energy she'd gathered compressed, forced through her magical core like water through a filter, changing as it moved. I intensified my gift, watching carefully for any signs of rejection or instability. This was the critical moment, where the components either harmonized or conflicted. For a heartbeat, I felt resistance, the various energies struggling against each other. Then my gift prevailed, smoothing the interactions, creating bridges where barriers tried to form. The runic arrays in the room flared brightly, then dimmed to a steady pulse, synchronizing with Callie's heartbeat. The frost at her feet spread outward, covering the floor in delicate crystalline patterns. Almost there, I said, voice tight with concentration. Rose, release the paradox gradually. Reka, anchor the script. Rose slowly pulled her hands apart, the distortion in reality fading progressively rather than all at once. Reka made one final gesture, her fingers tracing a complex seal in the air that seemed to sink into Callie's chest, directly over her heart. As the paradox space dissolved completely, Callie dropped to one knee, breathing heavily. The frost around her melted instantly as normal reality reasserted itself. Callie. Reika rushed forward, concern evident on her face. I'm fine, Callie said, waving her off. Just intense. She pushed herself back to her feet, swaying slightly before steadying. Did it work? In answer, I picked up a letter opener from my desk and tossed it to her. Check. She caught it deftly, understanding immediately. Without hesitation, she dragged the blade across her palm, opening a shallow cut. Blood welled for a moment, then the wound closed before our eyes, healing in seconds. Enhanced regeneration, I confirmed. And the other abilities should manifest soon. You'll need to practice, learn to control them. Callie flexed her hand, a slow smile spreading across her face. Not bad, Nightingale. Not bad at all. Rose approached me, her expression a mix of amazement and lingering concern. That was incredible. I've never seen gifts used in conjunction like that before. Few have, I replied, allowing myself a moment of pride. It takes compatible gifts and precise control. Most attempts end in disaster. But not yours, she said, studying me with new eyes. Not mine, I agreed. The unspoken question hung between us. How had I known it would work? How had I calculated the exact pattern needed to achieve this transformation? But Rose was too clever to ask directly. Instead, she simply nodded, filing away this new piece of the puzzle that was Arthur Nightingale. So what's the next step? Callie asked, examining her hand with fascination. You said this was just the beginning. It is, I confirmed. The full transformation will require several more procedures, each more complex than the last. But today was the foundation, and it was successful. Well, I clapped my hands together, breaking the moment. I think we're done for today. Callie, rest. Your body needs time to adjust. Reika, excellent work with the script, precise as always. They both nodded, moving toward the door. Callie paused before exiting, glancing back at me. Arthur, she said, her voice uncharacteristically serious. Thank you. I nodded once, acknowledging the rare display of gratitude. She flashed a quick smile, then disappeared through the doorway, Reika following close behind. As the door slid shut, Rose turned to me, arms crossed, a pout on her face. I smiled, patting my lap invitingly. After a moment's hesitation, she relented, allowing me to pull her back into her previous position. I leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to her neck before whispering in her ear, not satisfied? She shivered, though whether from my touch or my words, I couldn't tell. You're impossible, she murmured, though there was no real reproach in her voice. I prefer ambitious, I countered, echoing our earlier conversation. Her cheeks colored slightly. Arthur, I should go. My father will be wondering where I am. Yet you don't want to. Let him wonder, I murmured, leaning closer. I'm not done with you yet. Before she could protest further, I kissed her, swallowing whatever objection she might have made. She resisted for approximately half a second before melting against me, her arms sliding around my neck. As her lips moved against mine, I couldn't help but smile into the kiss. Phase 1 of Zombie Princess Plan was complete. Chapter 289, Prelude to Third Mission, 1. My fall break ended soon after we finished Phase 1 of my Zombie Princess Plan. Which meant it was time to return to Mythos Academy. Technically, I had been absent for over 5 weeks, thanks to my inconvenient coma following the second mission. My extended disappearance wasn't exactly subtle, so before classes resumed, I had one more thing to take care of. A meeting with Headmaster Eva Lopez. So now, I found myself sitting across from the most powerful woman in Mythos Academy, her violet eyes fixed on me with an expression somewhere between exasperation and amusement. Her office was surprisingly minimalist, a large desk of polished oak, walls lined with books, and a massive window overlooking the academy grounds. The sun was just beginning to set, casting long shadows across the campus. "Arthur," she said, rubbing her temples with slender fingers, "why does it feel like something insane always happens around you?" I blinked, feigning innocence. "Excuse me?" She sighed, leaning back in her chair. The leather creaked softly as she moved. "Look, I'm not blaming you. I'm not evil," she added dryly. "But you have a way of turning what should be straightforward missions into something dangerous." I kept my face neutral, a carefully cultivated blank mask that revealed nothing of my thoughts. She didn't buy it. Not for a second. Her eyes narrowed slightly, seeing through the facade with the ease of someone who had been reading people for decades. "Anyway," she continued, absently adjusting one of the silver bangles on her wrist, "the Empire has decided to reward you for your overachievement. Since you played a major role in taking down the bishop, they want to give you a medal for merit. And because of that, we've give you a perfect score for your second mission. Can't have the world laughing at us now, can we?" The irony in her voice was unmistakable. Politics and appearances, always taking precedence over reality. "How generous," I said, though I wasn't exactly complaining. A perfect score was a perfect score, regardless of how it was earned. "Don't push your luck," she said flatly, her violet eyes hardening for just a moment. "And for the love of all things holy, try not to cause another international incident during the third mission. You are not ready to be fighting the cults." The air in the room seemed to tighten as she said the word, as if the very atmosphere recoiled from it. Cults. I understood the weight behind it. Everyone did. The 5 organizations that stood at the pinnacle of humanity's enemies, each one dedicated to a different aspect of the miasma that threatened to consume our world. "You know the history of the world, right?" she asked, her voice softer but no less firm. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on the desk, her expression suddenly more serious. I nodded. "There were 2 points in history where humanity had the upper hand," she said, her gaze distant, as if seeing through time itself. "Where we were on the verge of wiping out the miasmic races for good." Her violet eyes darkened, clouded with the weight of a history that had shaped our entire civilization. The first was before the Industrial Revolution, in the late 17th century. We were winning. Humanity had surpassed its enemies and was on track to eradicate them completely. And then. I didn't need her to finish. This was a story carved into the consciousness of every person who fought against the darkness. "The Crimson Night happened," I said, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. She nodded grimly, a strand of her silver hair falling across her face. She tucked it back absently, her expression haunted. "The Crimson Night, a single day when, as the sun left each continent, everything changed. Entire cities were wiped off the map. Governments fell. And 5 new powers emerged from the darkness. The rise of the 5 cults. The vampire cult in the central continent, now the Red Chalice. The demon cult in the eastern continent, now the Order of the Fallen Flame. The beast cult in the southern continent, now the Abyssal Kin. The ogre cult in the western continent, now the Savage Communion. The shadow cult in the northern continent, now the Umbervale Covenant." Eva continued, turning back to face me. "The second time was under Liam Kagu. The golden age of humanity. The world had never been stronger. The eastern continent alone was enough to hold off 2 of the cults at the same time." I knew this story well. Everyone did. It was the closest humanity had come to victory in centuries. Back in the 19th century, the demon cult had controlled the eastern continent, while the vampire cult held sway in the central continent. But the eastern continent was different. Stronger. They didn't just resist the cults, they crushed them. The demon cult, despite all its power, was on the verge of collapse. In a desperate bid for survival, they begged the vampire cult for aid. The vampire cult responded. They crossed the sea to reinforce their allies. And then, they got crushed too. Both cults were on the brink of destruction. Until he appeared. Until the heavenly demon rose. A single being whose power tipped the scales, whose very existence changed the course of the war. The details were classified, known only to those with the highest clearance, but the outcome was not. The Golden Age ended, and the two cults switched continents, buying enough time to recover. Eva exhaled, rubbing her forehead with a weariness that seemed to age her before my eyes. At least one of the cults was wiped out. Right. That's what people still believed. But those who remain. She trailed off, leaving the implications hanging in the air between us. I understood. These were not normal people. They were those who had abandoned their humanity. They were those who worshipped something worse than devils or demons. They had given themselves to the miasma, let it corrupt them from within, transform them into something no longer human. And they sought to do the same to the rest of humanity. What did you think when you faced the bishop, Arthur? Eva asked suddenly, turning back to me with an intensity that was almost physical. I blinked, caught off guard by the direct question. What did I think? High. The power level was too high. Even after Carrie forced him to rush and thus get injured. Even though he hadn't fought me at full power. Even when he was just testing me out of sheer curiosity. The difference was overwhelming. A wall of power so vast it made a mockery of everything I had. Even with Reika's gift, even with pushing Erebus past its limits, even after unlocking my second gift. I had barely survived. A tired bishop. And he had played with me like a cat with a mouse, extending my suffering for his own amusement, testing the limits of my abilities with casual cruelty. The gap between us was humiliating. But so what? I clenched my fist, feeling my nails dig into my palm. In the end, he was just a bishop. There were cardinals above him. And above them, the 5 popes. And above the popes, the true rulers of the miasmic species. Jack Blaze Spout. Caledros von Noctis. The demon lords. And at the very peak of all evil in this world. The demon overlord. The being whose existence was half legend, half nightmare. The ultimate enemy of humanity. I will win, I said, my voice low but firm. Huh? Eva looked at me, confusion briefly crossing her features. I turned my gaze toward her, meeting those violet eyes directly. Something in my expression made her pause, made the confusion fade into watchfulness. There will be a next time, I said, my voice steady, each word precise and deliberate. And the next time I face a bishop, I will win. No hesitation. No doubt. No uncertainty. The world had rules. Power structures. Hierarchies that had remained in place for centuries. But rules could be broken. Power structures could be toppled. Hierarchies could be rewritten. Next time, I will win, 100%. No matter what. Without anybody's help. I meant every word. This wasn't bravado or false confidence. This was a statement of fact, a declaration of intent that I would make reality through whatever means necessary. I saw the flicker of something in Eva's eyes. Surprise, certainly. But something else too. Recognition, perhaps. Or understanding. Then, she smiled. And for the first time, I saw a glimpse of respect in her expression. Not the cautious acknowledgement she gave to talented students, but true respect, the kind reserved for equals. Two types of people can say that when they are this weak, Eva said as she leaned in to flick my forehead, the casual gesture at odds with the seriousness of her tone, idiots infected with madness or. Her violet eyes sparkled as she smiled wider, the expression transforming her face, making her look younger, almost girlish. Geniuses who aren't satisfied with what they have. Your answer is beyond acceptable, Arthur. After all, you are rank 1 of Mythos Academy. Thank you, I said as I looked at her with surprise, a hand on my forehead where she had flicked me. The gesture was strangely personal, almost familial. I want you to grow well, Eva said, her expression sobering slightly as she returned to her desk. After all, this generation. She let our words trail off, but I could tell what she was saying. I could feel her hope. That finally, this generation will end it. This generation will end the cults and the miasmic species. And well, in the future, we won't have any choice. Chapter 290, Prelude to Third Mission, 2. I barely had a second to process before a blur of silver crashed into me. Cold yet familiar arms wrapped around my neck, pressing against me with surprising force. Seraphina? I muttered, momentarily stunned. She looked up, ice-blue eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. Her long silver hair framed her face, cascading like moonlight over my shoulder. Arthur, she said, her voice quiet but firm. There was no hesitation, no unnecessary words. Just a statement of fact. As if saying my name was enough. I held her back, feeling the way she clung to me, not desperately, not frantically, but completely. Seraphina didn't do things halfway. When she committed to something, or someone, it was absolute. What are you doing here? I asked, still slightly breathless. The academy dormitories were restricted. How did you even get in? Not important, she replied, her tone utterly dismissive. Of course. That was very Seraphina. Rules were mere suggestions to her, obstacles to be navigated around when they stood between her and what she wanted. Her fingers traced lightly over my collar, barely brushing against my skin. The touch was feather-light, yet I felt it with startling clarity. Then, as if she had made some sort of decision, she lifted her chin slightly. I missed you, she admitted. A rare thing for Seraphina to say. She was never one for grand declarations or overflowing emotions. Her love wasn't loud like Rachel's, nor teasing like Cecilia's. It was subtle, like the quiet stillness before a snowfall. And right now, that snowfall had settled completely on me. I tilted her chin up, brushing my lips against hers. She tensed for a moment, then melted into me, her hands gripping the fabric of my jacket. Her kiss was cool at first, careful, restrained. But the moment I deepened it, she exhaled softly, her fingers tightening against me as she gave in. Minutes passed. Or maybe hours. I didn't know. Time felt irrelevant. Finally, I pulled back, watching the way her usually composed face held the barest hint of warmth. A soft blush dusted her pale skin, her eyes just a little dazed. You've gotten better at that, she murmured, her voice level, but I caught the hint of something else beneath it. Something almost vulnerable. I smirked, not needing to respond with words. I couldn't see you for much, she said after a while, her voice so quiet I almost missed it. When you woke up. I know, I replied. It wasn't enough, she continued, her fingers absently tracing patterns on my chest. The touch was light, almost hesitant, unusual for Seraphina, who was always so certain in everything she did. I needed to make sure you were really okay. I understood what she wasn't saying. Seraphina, who prided herself on control and composure, had been worried. For someone like her, admitting even this much vulnerability was rare. I'm here now, I said, tightening my arms around her, feeling the slight chill of her skin against mine. Seraphina always ran cold, as if winter itself flowed through her veins. She nodded once, a slight movement against my shoulder. Good. We stood there in silence for a moment longer, the evening light filtering through the dormitory window, casting long shadows across the floor. I should go, Seraphina finally said, though she made no move to leave. You could stay, I suggested, not quite ready to let her go. The thought of the empty room after she left seemed suddenly unbearable. She pulled back slightly, studying my face with her penetrating gaze. Those ice-blue eyes missed nothing, cataloging every detail, every micro-expression. That would be unwise. When has that ever stopped us? I asked, allowing a small smile to form. The corner of her mouth twitched, almost imperceptibly. Never. Just like that, I picked her up and put her on my lap as I sat in bed. Her slight frame fit perfectly against me, as if she had been designed to occupy this exact space. Her cheeks turned into a beautiful shade of red, a stark contrast against her silver hair and pale skin. "Arthur," she said, my name carrying a weight from her lips that it never did from anyone else's. Her hands found my shoulders, steadying herself. "I was so afraid. When I heard you fought a bishop. Why did you do something so stupid?" The question hung between us, heavy with everything she wasn't saying. Serafina never wasted words, each one was carefully chosen, precisely delivered. "I had to," I responded, meeting her gaze directly. No point in lying to her, she would see through it immediately. Serafina turned back, her eyes narrowing, the temperature in the room seeming to drop a few degrees with her displeasure. "I don't believe your genius brain couldn't come up with a better plan. I also heard from Rachel that you didn't call the ascendant rank knight captain till much later." Of course Rachel would tell her that. "Guilty as charged," I said as I pulled her in while putting my forehead on her shoulder, breathing in her scent, winter roses and frost. "That is correct. In the end, the plan I came up with was to end up fighting him." "Why?" Serafina urged, one cool hand coming up to rest against the back of my neck. Not pushing me away, but not letting me hide either. "'Cause I need to be stronger," I said, the words feeling inadequate even as they left my mouth. How could I explain the burning need that consumed me? The knowledge that I wasn't yet enough to protect what mattered? "Even stronger?" she asked as I nodded. There was a note of confusion in her voice, barely perceptible but there. Serafina had known me long enough to understand my drive, but not the depths of it. I looked at Serafina properly. She was stronger now, close to white rank. She would reach white rank by the time I reached low integration rank. The gap between us was closing, but still there, and that wasn't even accounting for the others, each powerful in their own right. And yet, compared to what we faced. "I want to protect all four of you, and for that, I need strength," I said as I kissed her forehead, a gesture that felt both tender and insufficient. "Fool," she said as she pushed me down onto the bed, her silver hair falling around us like a curtain, isolating us from the rest of the world. Her eyes, usually so cold and controlled, now burned with an intensity that caught me off guard. "Think about how much we worry about you." Then, she kissed me, her lips firm against mine, demanding a response. "Think about how much it hurts us." She kissed my lips again, more gently this time, a contrast that left me breathless. "Think about how much my heart hurts." She kissed again, the gesture becoming almost desperate. "Think," she said, her voice choking as she pointed to her chest, a rare display of emotion from someone who guarded her feelings so carefully, "about how my heart which beats solely for you will be like when you are not around." The tremble in her voice undid me. Serafina, who faced down monsters without flinching, whose composure never wavered even in the direst circumstances, was allowing me to see her fear. Her vulnerability. "Sarah," I said as she looked at me with a sad expression, one that seemed to age her beyond her years. In that moment, I could see all the losses she had endured, all the pain she had carefully hidden away. "I love you," she whispered in my ear, her voice sending tingles all over my body, each word deliberate and weighted with meaning. "I want you so much that I was willing to declare war on Rachel for you. I will do anything for you. So be mine." The possessiveness in her tone didn't surprise me. Serafina had always been territorial, had always seen the world in terms of what was hers to protect and what wasn't. What surprised me was the raw emotion behind it, the plea beneath the command. I grabbed her and flipped us, going on top of her in one fluid motion. Her hair spread across my pillow like spilled moonlight, her eyes widening slightly at the sudden change in position. She blinked as I kissed her deeply, pouring everything I couldn't say into the gesture. My apology for worrying her. My gratitude for her concern. My promise to try to be more careful, even knowing it was one I might not be able to keep. Finally, we broke apart as I needed to breathe. She didn't, not yet, another reminder of how different she was, how unique. I love you too, Seraphina, I said, brushing a strand of silver hair from her face, letting my fingers linger against her cool skin. And I'm sorry. She studied me for a long moment, those ice blue eyes seeing more than I wanted to reveal. But you'll do it again, won't you? Risk yourself. Push too far. It wasn't a question. She already knew the answer. I have to, I said quietly. There's too much at stake. Seraphina sighed, a soft sound that seemed to carry the weight of ancient winters. I know. Her fingers traced the line of my jaw, feather-light. That's why I haven't frozen you in place and locked you away somewhere safe. The matter-of-fact way she said it made me chuckle, despite the seriousness of the moment. You've considered it? Daily, she admitted, the barest hint of a smile touching her lips. Especially after the Bishop incident. I leaned down to kiss her again, savoring the cool sweetness of her mouth. I'll try to be more careful, I promised. It was the most I could offer. You won't, she countered, seeing through me as always. But you might consider letting us help more. You're not alone, Arthur. Her words struck deeper than I expected. The idea of putting any of them in danger made my chest tighten painfully, but she was right. I'd been trying to shield them, to carry the burden alone. I'll try, I said, meaning it this time. Seraphina nodded, accepting my promise for what it was, not a guarantee, but a genuine effort. She pulled me down beside her, arranging us so that my arms served as her pillow, her back pressed against my chest. Chapter 291, Prelude to Third Mission, 3. I walked into Class 2A, a place that felt both familiar and strangely distant after my 5-week absence. The 10 seats, arranged in their usual 2x5 format, were all occupied by the Academy's most exceptional students. As I stepped in, I felt a few gazes turn my way. The air was charged with a mixture of curiosity and surprise. My return clearly hadn't gone unnoticed. The classroom itself was unchanged, the same reinforced walls designed to withstand errant bursts of mana, the same advanced holodisplays at the front, the same faint scent of energy-infused cleaning agents used to remove the occasional scorch marks or frost patterns. It was comforting in its predictability. Arthur, Lucifer greeted me first, his verdant eyes glinting with curiosity. His silver-white hair was slightly longer than when I'd last seen him, falling just above his shoulders now. I heard you were in a coma. What happened? I took my seat beside him, the rank 1 seat, still mine after all this time. It was strange how important such a small thing could feel. Had a run-in with a bishop, I said, leaning back casually. He was injured, so I managed to survive. Lucifer blinked. Wait, actually? You fought a bishop? I nodded, watching his reaction carefully. His usual calm demeanor cracked for a moment as his eyes widened slightly. Even he, the hero, was surprised. The flicker of genuine shock on his face was almost worth the near-death experience. I smirked a little. In the original story, Lucifer's first real battle against a bishop came when he was a high integration ranker, a moment that solidified his legend. And yet, here I was, having done it without even reaching integration rank. Of course, he ended up defeating the bishop alone with the bishop at full power, while I had barely survived a wounded one. As expected, you're incredible, Lucifer muttered, shaking his head slightly before resting his chin on his hand. There was genuine respect in his voice, tinged with something that might have been concern. Says the guy who's already integration rank. I could feel the shift in his mana. He had fully stepped into that level, while I was still lagging a step behind. The difference was subtle but unmistakable, like comparing a burning candle to a small bonfire. It was only a matter of time before he left me in the dust if I didn't push myself harder. Before I could say anything, a loud voice interrupted us. Arthur. Long time no see, man. Ian Vizirian strode up with a wide grin, clapping me on the shoulder with enough force to make me wince slightly. The dragon-blooded prince radiated warmth, both metaphorically and literally. His mana always carried a heat to it, like standing too close to a furnace. His crimson hair seemed to glow under the classroom lights, catching fire with every movement. "Glad to see you're still alive," he added, shaking my hand with a strong grip that would have crushed the fingers of anyone with lesser physical enhancement. "Of course," I said with a chuckle. "It'll take more than a bishop to get rid of me." "That's the spirit." Ian laughed, his voice filling the classroom. "Next time, let me in on the fight, yeah?" My flames could have helped. Would have roasted that bishop nice and crispy. I smiled but didn't say anything. If Ian had been there, it would have turned into a full-blown battlefield. The last thing I needed was another future Radiant ranker getting dragged into my mess. Besides, Ian's idea of help usually involved reducing everything within a half-mile radius to smoldering ash. "Seriously though," he added, his tone dropping slightly as he leaned in. "You good? Heard you were pretty messed up." "I'm fine now," I assured him. "Just needed some time to recover." He nodded, seemingly satisfied with my answer. "Well, don't go hogging all the glory next time. Some of us want a crack at those cult bastards too." As Ian and Lucifer continued talking, I glanced around the classroom, taking stock of my other classmates. Renkagu was watching me. Not in an obvious way, but his violet eyes lingered on me longer than necessary before he turned his attention back to his notebook. He never said much, and right now was no exception. His white hair fell across his face, partially obscuring his expression, but I caught the calculating gleam in his eyes. He was analyzing me. Ren wasn't like the others. He didn't waste time on small talk or pleasantries. He watched, calculated, and waited. And then there was Clanna. As usual, she was sleeping. Head down, arms crossed, her slow, steady breathing making it clear she had absolutely no intention of participating in whatever chaos the rest of us were stirring up. Her long navy blue hair spilled across her desk like a curtain. No one questioned it anymore. We just accepted that Clanna operated on a different plane of existence than the rest of us. And well, I didn't have to mention Jean, who was pointedly ignoring me. Then there were the four girls, Rachel, Cecilia, Serafina, and Rose. They kept stealing glances at me when they thought I wasn't looking. Cecilia was the most obvious, turning fully in her seat to flash me a brilliant smile. Rachel was more subtle, watching me from the corner of her eye with that familiar smirk playing on her lips. Serafina maintained her usual composure, but her ice blue gaze lingered a moment longer than necessary. And Rose seemed to be trying very hard not to look at me at all, which only made her furtive glances more noticeable. I sighed. Some things never changed. It was good to be back, despite everything. The familiarity of these rivalries, friendships, and whatever complicated thing I had with the four girls was oddly comforting after weeks of recovery. Finally, the door slid open as Professor Nero stepped inside. Conversation immediately died down, everyone straightening in their seats, except Clanna, who continued to sleep peacefully. Ian moved back to his seat as the professor reached the center of the front of the class. Nero looked exactly as I remembered him, immaculately dressed in the Academy's official instructor uniform, his gray hair neatly trimmed, his posture rigid with military precision. The only sign of the passing weeks was perhaps a few more lines around his eyes. "Welcome back everyone," he said, his eyes turning to me, lingering for a moment with an unreadable expression. "And especially you, Arthur. I hope your fall break was fulfilling." There was a hint of dry humor in his tone that wasn't lost on me. My fall break had involved a coma and extensive healing. Hardly fulfilling in the traditional sense. "Now, as you know, we have two main events this half of the semester," Nero continued, activating the holodisplay with a gesture. A calendar materialized in the air, key dates highlighted in glowing red. "We have your second practical evaluation, which will technically be your third mission that you will undertake. And we have the Inter-Academy Festival." The mention of the festival caused a ripple of excitement through the class. The annual competition between the world's top academies was a prestigious event, one that attracted attention from the highest levels of government and military. "Your second practical evaluation will be in 2 weeks, so you don't have much time till that," Nero warned, his expression growing more serious. This time, you will be taking more dangerous missions near the borders. Near the borders? Rachel repeated as Nero nodded. Everyone's expressions darkened. The atmosphere in the room shifted, the earlier excitement replaced by tension so thick you could almost taste it. After all, the borders being mentioned by Nero were the borders between the continents and the lands ruled by miasmic beasts and the cults. These weren't just geographical boundaries, they were frontlines in humanity's ongoing war against extinction. Yes, the borders, Nero confirmed, his voice taking on a harder edge. The Academy believes that after your 2 mission experiences, you're ready for more challenging assignments. You will be operating in teams of 2 to 3, with support from regular military units, but your objectives will be independent. Will we choose our own partners? Lucifer asked, glancing around the room. Nero shook his head. Partners will be assigned based on complementary abilities and your individual performance metrics from previous missions. We're looking to balance strengths and compensate for weaknesses. Chapter 292, Prelude to Third Mission, 4. So it was time. I leaned back slightly, watching as Nero explained the details of the third mission, his voice crisp and authoritative as it cut through the tense silence of the classroom. The holographic display behind him showed maps of various conflict zones, shifting and highlighting as he spoke. The front lines. This mission was a significant step up from the last 2. Mythos Academy students would be deployed into actual battle zones, real wars against real enemies, not simulations or controlled engagements. The stakes were higher, the dangers more immediate, and the consequences far more permanent. I already knew what was coming. In the novel, this was where Lucifer made a name for himself, taking down a high integration rank orc in single combat and earning even more widespread recognition for his strength. It was a pivotal moment in his rise to prominence, one of the first stepping stones on his path to becoming the legendary hero who would eventually challenge the demon overlord himself. I glanced at him. The current Lucifer was even stronger than the one in the novel, his mana signature already settling into the patterns characteristic of low integration rank. That fight would be easier than ever for him, perhaps even disappointingly so. His verdant eyes were focused on the display, absorbing every detail with the calm assurance of someone who never doubted his own abilities. As you all know, Nero continued, his sharp eyes scanning the room, lingering momentarily on each face as if assessing our readiness, there are 3 major continental front lines. We are pushing all of you out of your comfort zones, so you won't be deployed to your home continents. It was a reasonable approach. 7 of the 10 students in this room were either princes or princesses. If they were sent to their own territories, they'd receive royal treatment, making the mission pointless. They'd be protected, coddled, kept safely away from any real danger. That wouldn't serve the Academy's purpose. Because of this, here are the decided groups, Nero said as the display behind him lit up with new information, names and destinations appearing in crisp, glowing text. I shifted my gaze to the holographic screen, studying the assignments with interest. Northern Continent, Jean, Ian, Cecilia. Southern Continent, Seraphina, Lucifer, Ren. Western Continent, Arthur, Clanna, Rachel, Rose. I tilted my head slightly. Rachel and Rose were with me. Not bad. The rest of Mythos Academy's students will also be deployed, but in separate zones from you within the same continental front line, Nero added, his finger tracing the map to indicate the broader deployment strategy. You will be working with local forces to support their ongoing efforts. I tapped my fingers against the desk, deep in thought. The Western Continent. That meant facing the forces of ogres and orcs that had been waging war for decades. The Western Front was known for brutal, grinding combat, less about finesse and more about raw power and endurance. The enemies there were physically stronger than humans, with thick hides that could resist conventional weapons. Your specific objectives will be provided upon arrival, Nero continued, his tone growing more severe. But I can tell you now that these won't be simple search and destroy missions. You'll be expected to integrate with the command structure, understand the strategic situation, and make meaningful contributions to the overall war effort. Ian raised his hand. Professor, how long will we be deployed? 1 week, Nero replied, you'll be departing next week. As Nero continued outlining logistical details, my mind was already racing ahead, formulating plans, considering contingencies. The Western continent presented unique opportunities, and not just for combat experience. The classroom was dimly lit, and not just because someone forgot to tell the lights to do their job. It was by design. The air itself seemed to buzz faintly with something uncomfortably close to dread, like the scent of ozone before a storm, or perhaps the smell of burning coffee right before an exam. I stepped in and found my usual seat at the front, which is where all the people with something to prove tend to sit. Today, though, there were 3 upper-year students already in the room. They weren't being loud or intimidating, which somehow made them even more so. One of them had silver tattoos curling down his arm like a spell that regretted being cast. Another wore a visor that filtered light like his eyes didn't quite agree with how photons worked. The third just radiated the quiet menace of someone who knew they were better than you and didn't need to say it out loud. Professor Helvane arrived 2 minutes late. Welcome, she said, her voice somehow smooth and sharp at the same time. Today, we begin your formal instruction in deep dark manipulation. She walked to the front of the class and tapped the desk. A hologram bloomed to life in the air. Deep dark, she continued, is not a sub-element. It is mana pushed beyond its limits, dark mana compressed and warped so densely it stops behaving like mana entirely. It is what emerges when integration rankers form a black star before their breakthrough. The upper-year students shifted slightly in their seats. There was a tension in their postures that spoke volumes. She paused and let the silence sit for a moment, heavy and twitching like a predator in tall grass. The hologram continued its slow pulse, drawing the eye despite the discomfort it caused. It is the opposite of pure light. Both deep dark and pure light are beyond normal mana. She turned her gaze on us, eyes lingering on the upper-year students before landing, just a little too long, on me. There was a knowing quality to her look, as if she could somehow sense the duality within me, the light and dark that existed in precarious balance. But then, some of you already have both. Her words hung in the air, weighted with implication. Her eyes never left mine, and I felt a cold certainty that she knew something about me, perhaps more than she should. I tried not to smile. Not because I was flattered, but because Luna was already muttering in my head, her voice a sharp counterpoint to Professor Helvane's measured tones. Oh, this is going to be fun, she said, with a voice like someone unwrapping popcorn in a theater where the movie is explosions. Her eagerness was palpable, a warm current of anticipation flowing through our shared consciousness. She wasn't wrong. Not this time. Professor Helvane moved away from the desk, circling the holographic black star like a predator assessing its prey. Deep dark manipulation is dangerous, she continued. It requires precise control and absolute focus. A momentary lapse can lead to corruption, or worse, consumption. Your mana becomes the predator, and you become the prey. At the same time, it is capable of fueling so much more when used properly. She tapped the edge of the hologram, causing it to ripple like disturbed water. Most of you have only scratched the surface of what deep dark can do. You've learned to generate it, to hold it, perhaps even to shape it into rudimentary forms. That's like learning to light a match and thinking you understand fire. The black star in the hologram pulsed, expanding slightly before contracting again, its edges growing sharper, more defined. Advanced application requires understanding that deep dark isn't just dark mana taken to extremes, it's fundamentally different. It follows its own rules, has its own logic. She paused, letting that sink in. Rules that often contradict everything you've been taught about conventional mana manipulation. Chapter 293, Prelude to Third Mission, 5. So. First day is over, Rachel announced, resting her chin on one hand and looking for all the world like a portrait of Grey sketched by someone trying to win an art contest and a political alliance at the same time. Her golden hair flowed over her shoulder like it had somewhere to be and didn't particularly mind being late. Yes. It is, said Cecilia, with the measured patience of someone keeping a mental tally of how many times they'd let someone else speak first. Her own golden locks shone under the room's ambient lights, but her crimson eyes sparkled like warning lights you really ought to pay attention to. "Why did you call us here?" Rose asked, her voice practical, direct, the tone of someone who had enough noblesse in her bloodline to skip over the flowery preamble. She sat across from Cecilia with the calmness of a woman trying not to get caught between two thunderstorms. Her auburn hair had clearly been combed with the kind of care usually reserved for diplomacy. Serafina said nothing. As usual. But the silence from her corner of the room was thick enough to spread on toast. She watched the three of them with the distant curiosity of a glacier slowly inching its way across a continent, which, in her case, was probably a perfectly accurate metaphor. 4 of the most powerful young women on the planet, all in the same room. Not a tea party. Not a diplomatic summit. Just something even more dangerous. Competition. The room itself seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. The plush furnishings of Rachel's dormitory suite, all imported from regions that considered expensive to be a compliment rather than a description, shrank back against the walls as if trying to avoid being caught in the crossfire. Even the lights appeared to dim slightly, perhaps hoping not to draw attention to themselves. "I believe it's been, 5 months?" Rachel said, tilting her head like a swan deciding where to stab. "Since we all gathered like this. So much has happened, hasn't it?" "Stop circling and say it, Saintess," muttered Cecilia, resting her cheek on her fist like she was trying to smother a yawn and a threat at the same time. The title, Saintess, hung in the air like a slightly patronizing pat on the head. Rachel's eyes narrowed. Her golden aura flared for a second, just enough to make the temperature rise like a passive-aggressive thermostat. Then she chuckled, the kind of laugh that echoed down the bloodlines of saints and troublemakers. "Fine, fine," she said sweetly. "I suppose you'll want to know that Arthur and I will be together for the mission evaluation. Same region. Same camp." There was a silence. Not the awkward kind. The sort of silence that lingers politely just long enough to see who throws the first fireball. "You," said 3 voices, in sync like an ancient prophecy finally being fulfilled. "I'm going too," Rose said coolly, leaning forward just enough to suggest that she wasn't intimidated in the slightest, which meant that she almost certainly was. "In case you've forgotten the assignment pairings." "Yes, but unlike you," Rachel said with the sort of smile that should have come with hazard warnings, "I'm uniquely equipped to support him. Healing, purifying, comforting. You know, useful things." "As opposed to what?" Cecilia asked with a delicate snort that somehow managed to be both aristocratic and deeply insulting. "Paradox manipulation? The ability to bend reality? I suppose those are just party tricks compared to your glowing hands." Rose accepted this unexpected defense with a gracious nod, careful not to look too grateful lest Cecilia change her mind and decide to verbally eviscerate her next. Rachel leaned back, looking satisfied with herself despite the barb. Her chair, sensing her mood, seemed to become even more comfortable in response. Then, casually, too casually, she added, "Also, I figured it out." Cecilia and Rose blinked. Serafina arched a single eyebrow, which for her was equivalent to raising a sword and challenging someone to a duel to the death at dawn. "Figured what out?" Cecilia asked, voice low and suspicious, the kind of tone that made small animals burrow underground and stay there until spring. Rachel's cheeks pinked with the unmistakable hue of smug embarrassment. The color spread across her face like a victory flag being hoisted slowly and with great ceremony. "He liked it. You didn't." Rose began, eyes narrowing to the point where one had to wonder if she could still see anything at all. "Did you show him?" Cecilia asked, and it wasn't quite a question. It was more like an accusation in designer heels. The temperature in the room dropped by at least 3 degrees, which was impressive considering the advanced climate control that was supposed to prevent exactly that kind of emotional weather. Rachel shook her head far too quickly. "Not yet. Not yet. But soon. Very soon." The temperature dropped further. A blue rose bloomed in midair, humming with manna like a polite warning that happened to be attached to thorns. A crimson strand of aura slithered into the space between them, like a whisper made of chaos that was considering becoming a shout. A spear of ice manifested, hovering just above Rachel's rug. The rug, which had been imported from the southern continent at a cost that could have funded a small city's defense budget for a year, seemed to cringe in anticipation of its imminent destruction. "Hey! This is my room," Rachel snapped, golden light flaring from her hand. Her light washed through the room like an annoyed sunbeam, purifying the magical tension before it could redecorate the wallpaper. "Do you have any idea how hard it is to get scorch marks out of celestial silk?" It was a minor clash. Barely a spark. The tiniest echo of the immense power each of them wielded. Still, the walls creaked in complaint and the table whimpered quietly in the corner. A framed photo on the wall, showing Rachel in flowing white robes accepting some kind of humanitarian award, tilted slightly to the left in what could only be described as passive-aggressive interior decoration. And somewhere, just barely above a whisper, the universe itself sighed and muttered, "Here we go again." The tension was broken by the sound of a teacup being placed deliberately on its saucer. All eyes turned to Seraphina, who had somehow acquired tea without anyone noticing her move. "Childish," she said, in a tone that could have flash-frozen a volcano. "Well, even then you're still dreaming like always," said Cecilia, pivoting away from Seraphina's judgment with the smugness of a woman who just found the last slice of cake and was making sure everyone saw her eat it. "I made out with him. For an hour." Rachel's expression dropped faster than a government budget promise. Her violet eyes gleamed, not with tears but with something far more dangerous, competitive spite. The temperature dipped with it, as if the very air had decided to side with her mood. "I did too, Cecilia." "You're not special," Rose chimed in, her voice casual, but there was a frost to it. The temperature dropped another degree. Somewhere in the room, a decorative plant gave up and wilted. "Bickering idiots," Seraphina said, without even looking up from the cup of tea she wasn't drinking. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her words had the weight of ancient glaciers. "I slept in the same bed as him." Rachel's head snapped up so quickly it might have caused whiplash. The air in the room seemed to crystallize, hanging suspended for a moment as if the laws of physics themselves were waiting for elaboration. Before she could ask, Seraphina added with an edge sharp enough to etch glass, "With consent." "I had consent." Rachel protested, clearly offended at the implication she hadn't. But her defense was met not with words, but with a collective, perfectly synchronized expression of doubt from the other three. It was the kind of synchronized facial expression that competitive teams trained years to achieve. Dismissive looks, 3. Dignity, 0. "Anyway," Rachel sniffed, twirling a strand of golden hair like it owed her money, "as long as I have him, he'll give in to me first." The other girls turned toward her slowly. Not to her face. Oh no. Their eyes were locked with the intense focus of satellites on a heat signature, on one particular, gravitationally significant part of her. Even Seraphina tilted her head, her usually placid expression twitching ever so slightly. The movement was almost imperceptible, like watching continental drift in real time, but for Seraphina it was practically a double take. Rose muttered something under her breath, the kind of thing you didn't say unless you were already halfway to a guilt spiral. "Even if it's Arthur," she murmured, trailing off like a sentence that decided it didn't want to start a war. Rachel didn't need to ask what she meant. She already knew. And her smile was pure, radiant victory. The kind of smile that said, "Checkmate. And also, you're welcome to forfeit any time." "Ladies," Rachel said, rising from her seat with the graceful inevitability of someone who knew exactly when to make an exit, "this has been delightful, truly. But I have preparations to make for our mission. A week with Arthur in a war zone." She let the thought linger in the air like an expensive perfume. "I intend to make the most of it." As she gestured toward the door, a subtle hint that the meeting was concluded, Cecilia stood as well, smoothing her uniform with the precise movements of a predator grooming itself before a hunt. "Don't get too comfortable with your advantage," she warned, her crimson eyes glinting. "War zones have a way of changing plans. And people. Rose and Seraphina rose as well, forming an unintentional tableau of power and beauty that would have made even the most jaded artist reach for a capture device. Until the Western Front, then, Rose said, her tone deceptively light. May the best woman win, Rachel replied with a smile that could have illuminated a small city. I intend to, said all four women simultaneously, then glared at each other with the kind of synchronized hostility that suggested they'd been practicing. Chapter 294, Third Mission, 1. Finally, it was time for the third mission. There was something different in the air this time, not just the ozone-rich tang of the warp gates or the distant hum of orbital drones, but the unmistakable weight of expectation. Tension floated through the academy halls like a very polite ghost that no one wanted to acknowledge, but everyone was painfully aware of. Unlike the previous missions, where students picked their own poison, this time the poison picked us. We were being sent directly to the frontier zones. This was the real thing. Well, as real as anything could be in a world where most conflicts were settled through carefully orchestrated shows of force rather than actual bloodshed. The age of total war was behind humanity, thankfully, but that didn't mean the borders between controlled territory and miasmic zones were anything resembling safe. And that was enough to make even the more arrogant students double-check their insurance nanobots. There were 3 continents hosting what instructors politely called active engagement areas: Northern, Southern, and Western. 100 second-year students were carefully divided into 3 main batches, then diced into smaller groups with the efficiency of a bureaucratic chef with a fondness for even numbers. Lucky me, I ended up stationed with Clana, Rose, and Rachel on the western frontier, otherwise known as the land of orcs, ogres, and people who thought tactical fashion meant dirt-resistant cloaks with unnecessarily dramatic collars. The Academy's departure hall buzzed with the usual pre-mission activities, last-minute equipment checks, hurried goodbyes, and the occasional panic attack disguised as enthusiastic stretching. Most students wore their standard-issue field uniforms, sleek, practical ensembles designed to look both intimidating and photogenic should any news drones happen to be in the area. Are you excited? Rachel asked, tilting her head in that dangerously disarming way of hers. Her smile was wide and full of sunshine, which would have been entirely appropriate if we weren't metaphorically standing under the gathering clouds of potential responsibility and actual physical exertion. Rachel had a very particular gift. Not one officially recorded in any spellbook or magical compendium, but potent nonetheless. She radiated joy like a miniature sun. Being near her was like having your soul baked at 180 degrees Celsius until it was golden brown and emotionally vulnerable. Yeah, I said with a smile, I'm excited. Because I'm with you? She asked, her smile turning the dial from sunny to blinding. She adjusted the strap of her field pack with the sort of casual grace that suggested she'd practiced the movement in front of a mirror until it looked effortlessly elegant. And Rose, I added helpfully, gesturing to where Rose was methodically organizing her equipment with the precision of someone who color-coded their sock drawer. Rachel blinked. Then beamed. Then threw herself into a hug so enthusiastic it could have knocked over a less fortified man. I managed to stay upright, barely. I missed you too, she said, completely ignoring the dozen or so curious, or scandalized, eyes from nearby students. A group of first-years watched with expressions ranging from awe to second-hand embarrassment. Then came Rose, moving with the deliberate grace of a noblewoman trained to make her disapproval felt through body language alone. She placed a perfectly manicured hand on Rachel's shoulder. A diplomatic tap. A warning shot. Rachel, of course, ignored her like a cat ignoring a water sprayer. The hand stayed. Rachel stayed. The air chilled by half a degree. A nearby temperature gauge actually registered the change, beeping softly in confusion. Finally, with a theatrical click of her tongue that could probably be weaponized if tuned correctly, Rachel disengaged and floated 2 centimeters away. Hey, Arthur, Rose said sweetly, her smile entirely innocent in the way that very much wasn't. I gave her a nod with a smile on my face, silently appreciating her ability to look combat-ready and runway-ready simultaneously. Wow, those 2 are already fighting, Clana said, drifting over to my side like a sleep-deprived wraith in a hoodie. Her uniform was technically correct but rumpled in a way that suggested she'd possibly slept in it. Or on it. Or near it. She yawned with all the drama of a Victorian ghost realizing it had to haunt again, and patted my shoulder with the casual sympathy of someone watching two kittens sharpen their claws as they glared at each other. "You're going to need hazard pay," Clanna muttered, stretching her arms like the act of being awake was a chore someone else had dumped on her to-do list. The frontier might actually be safer than this. Around us, other student groups formed, clustered according to their assigned destinations. Gene and his team were preparing for the northern region, their equipment designed for colder climates. I spotted Lucifer with his southern team, looking as perfectly composed as ever, like he'd just stepped out of a recruitment poster rather than preparing for a potentially hazardous assignment. Ren caught my eye from across the hall and gave me a slight nod, the kind of acknowledgement that contained neither friendship nor hostility, just professional recognition. I returned it with similar neutrality. Before I could respond to Clanna, perhaps with something inspiring, or at least resigned, Nero's voice sliced through the charged air like a laser through butter. "All second-year students are present, so let's begin," Nero said, his voice amplified by some invisible sound system that made every word sound like a commandment from on high. He stood on a raised platform at the front of the hall, managing to look both completely still and somehow radiating impatience. "As previously stated, you've been assigned to different sections of the frontier zones. Upon arrival, you'll be under the guidance of military officers designated to your region. I don't care if you're a prince or a princess, none of it matters." He paused. The silence that followed was the kind that suggested something important was about to be said. Possibly followed by something very, very bureaucratic. "You will listen. You will observe. And you will adapt. These are not simulations. The frontier zones are controlled, but they are not safe. You are here to learn how to lead, yes, but also how to assess risk and make appropriate decisions." Well, that was moderately comforting. At least he hadn't explicitly mentioned death this time. Remember, these frontier posts maintain the balance between our territories and the wilder regions. Most of what you'll encounter are surveillance operations, containment protocols, and occasional small-scale engagements. Your job is to learn, not to be heroes. This last bit seemed directed specifically at several known troublemakers in our class, possibly including me, if the brief eye contact was any indication. The warp gate activated in a flash of violet-blue light that danced with static. The very fabric of spacetime did a little shimmy. "Western Continent teams, you're first," Nero announced. I felt a slight nudge against my arm and turned to find Clanna offering me half of her nutrient bar. The gesture was so unexpected I almost didn't react. "Take it," she said with the seriousness of someone offering their last will and testament. I accepted the offering with appropriate solemnity. "Thanks." "I packed snacks," Rachel interjected, patting a suspiciously large pocket on her field pack. "Homemade energy cookies with enhanced nutritional profiles." "I brought actual food," Rose countered smoothly. "Vacuum-sealed gourmet meals prepared by the Vokrit Estate's head chef." The two women stared at each other with the intense focus of rival predators who'd spotted the same prey. Clanna sighed deeply, the sound of someone who'd seen this particular movie too many times and was tired of the predictable plot. "This is going to be a long 2 weeks." One by one, we began stepping into the gate, our boots echoing softly as we crossed the threshold between Academy Luxury and whatever frontier post awaited us on the other side. Clanna yawned again, just before stepping through. "Hope there's a bed on the other side," she muttered. "Or at least a post with reasonable nap breaks." And with that, she vanished in a shimmer of light. Rachel went next, her golden hair catching the warp glow like it had been engineered to do so. She didn't look back, but she did adjust her posture just enough to ensure her silhouette was at its most photogenic as she disappeared. Rose followed, more composed, a silent vow in her eyes. A promise to do more than just participate, a promise to excel. Then it was my turn. I took a breath, mentally reviewing my own preparations and plans. The Western frontier wasn't just an assignment, it was an opportunity. One that fit perfectly into what I needed to accomplish. Mr. Nightingale, Nero said just as I approached the gate. Try not to cause an international incident this time. I smiled politely. No promises, Professor. And with that, I stepped through the gate, leaving behind the safety of the academy and toward whatever awaited on the frontier. Not war, exactly, but definitely not peace either. Something in between, the careful balance that humanity had maintained for generations. A balance I intended to tip, when the time was right. Chapter 295, Third Mission, 2. What did people expect when they heard the words front lines? Some battered trench full of mud, blood, and the smell of old regrets? Ration tents and broken radios, the standard post-apocalyptic picnic? Maybe the occasional grizzled veteran growling about the old days, while lighting a cigar with a flamethrower? Well, yes. But also no. The truth was stranger. The frontier outpost looked like someone had asked a paranoid architect to build a fortress, and then told him to do it again, but bigger and with extra budget. Towering walls stretched out like the skeletons of long-dead titans, bristling with sensor arrays, defense systems, and enough shielding to survive a minor geological event or an aggressive family dinner. Behind those walls weren't tents, there were modular complexes, reinforced buildings designed to be picked up, dropped into a monitoring zone, and then promptly maintain operations under almost any conditions. They housed everything: living quarters, canteens, clinics, strategy halls, even coffee shops with unnecessarily poetic drink names. It wasn't quite a military compound in the traditional sense. More like a highly secure research station with combat capabilities. As I stepped through the warp gate, the world shimmered for half a second before solidifying into the unmistakable atmosphere of the frontier. You could feel it in the air, heavy, charged, and watching you like someone evaluating a potentially interesting but unpredictable new colleague. Waiting there, standing with the posture of someone who never stopped standing straight, was a woman. Her hair flowed in soft shades of frostbitten blue, like winter wind turned into silk. Golden eyes, sharp and crackling with mana, swept over us like searchlights judging a performance they didn't expect much from. And oh, she was powerful. Not the loud kind. No explosions, no auras that screamed. Her strength was quiet, like a loaded gun, safety off, pointed somewhere just out of sight. Maylin Potton. Peak immortal rank necromancer. The kind of name that made other names feel underdressed. Also, a 6-star Grand Marshal. Meaning she'd earned more military distinctions than most people had bones. She raised one hand. Attention. Her voice cracked across the air like a whip wrapped in authority. The 3 girls at my side, Rachel, Rose, and Clanna, straightened faster than guilt in a church. I casually adjusted my posture as well, trying not to look like the slouching schoolboy who just realized the headmistress was behind him. "Welcome, Academy students," she said, her tone sharp, her vowels precise enough to draw blood. "I am Grand Marshal Maylin. You are now under my jurisdiction for the duration of this mission." Her eyes glided over us, weighing, measuring. Perhaps contemplating our potential, just in case. I will say this only once: do not treat this like a vacation. This is not an internship. You will not be pampered. You will not be sheltered. And you certainly will not be special. Not to me. She stepped forward once, heels clicking like punctuation marks. To me, you are trainees. You are assets. Your rank, your bloodline, your royal titles, none of it matters beyond what you can contribute to operations. The only thing that separates you from the rest of the personnel is whether or not you perform. And trust me, I expect performance. Maylin Potton tapped her tablet with the clinical precision of someone who'd probably used it to order both coffee and tactical assessments in the same breath. She scrolled, skimmed, and looked up at us like we were particularly interesting entries in a spreadsheet labeled Academy Visitors with Potential. "I got your files from Mythos," she said. "Every duel, every test, every time you blinked too hard and destabilized a training room. I must admit, you're all quite exceptional. Annoyingly so." Her golden eyes flicked to me. Arthur Nightingale, one step below integration rank, gifted, and a suspicious tendency to survive things you shouldn't. Your captain. Then she pointed vaguely at the others with the tablet like it was a holy relic. Rachel, Rose, Clanna, lieutenants. Under his command. Rachel looked proud, shoulders straightening further, a subtle smile touching her lips. Rose raised a brow, the slight tilt of her head suggesting she was already calculating the implications. Clanna yawned, though she did manage to look slightly more alert than usual. It's a small unit, Maylin continued, but you'll be merged with other teams for operations. That said, don't expect to coast on the others' work. I'll know if you do. I always know. The shadows seemed to lean in a little at that. And now, you're dismissed for the day. Rest. Hydrate. Don't do anything that would require paperwork. She glanced at a soldier nearby. Private Rogues, guide them to their accommodations. The private saluted with the efficiency of a man who had recently remembered his superior outranked him by several universes and set off marching. We followed, carrying our gear with a blend of respectful attention and subtle confusion. As we walked through the complex, Private Rogues, a lean man with close-cropped hair and the watchful eyes of someone who had seen enough to be cautious but not enough to be jaded, pointed out various facilities. Mess hall is that way, he said, gesturing to a large building with actual windows. Food's decent. Chef used to work at a 5-star restaurant in the central continent before deciding cooking for soldiers was more honest work. Is there a training area? Rose asked, her voice perfectly modulated to sound merely curious rather than eager. 2, actually, Rogues replied. Standard Physical Training Center is in the East Wing. The Mana Practice Facility is underground, safer that way. Clanna perked up momentarily. And the recreational areas? Rogues almost smiled. We have a common room with entertainment systems, a small library, and what passes for a garden on the roof of the administrative building. Not exactly luxury, but better than what most outposts have. How often do you see combat? I asked, watching his reaction carefully. His expression shifted slightly, becoming more measured. Less than you might think. We monitor the border more than we engage. Most days are routine patrols and sensor maintenance. The occasional skirmish happens, but large-scale confrontations are rare. Rachel stepped closer to me as we walked, her shoulder occasionally brushing against mine. What about medical facilities? She asked, her interest genuine. I've trained extensively in healing arts. Full clinic with modern equipment, Rogues answered, seeming to appreciate her professional interest. Dar. Voss runs it, she's ascendant rank with a specialization in healing. You'll likely meet her during your orientation tomorrow. We turned down a corridor with polished floors and reinforced walls. The lighting was practical but not harsh, creating an atmosphere of efficiency rather than austerity. The marshal mentioned we'd be working with other teams, I said. Are there other academy students here? Rogues nodded. 3 other groups arrived yesterday. They've been assigned to different sections based on their abilities. You'll be briefed on the full structure tomorrow. Rose moved forward to walk beside me, creating a subtle triangle with Rachel. And what's our first assignment likely to be? She asked, her tone suggesting she was already planning 3 steps ahead. Observation, most likely, Rogues said. The marshal usually starts newcomers with reconnaissance patrols. Gets you familiar with the terrain and protocols without immediately throwing you into anything complex. He stopped before a row of doors, each marked with a simple numeric designation. Your quarters. 204 through 207. Captain gets the end unit, slightly larger. Standard amenities inside. Comm panel by the door connects to central command if needed. Clanna was already eyeing her door like it contained the promise of a comfortable pillow. When's the morning briefing? She asked, stifling another yawn. 0800 hours, Rogues replied. Mess hall opens at 0600 if you want breakfast first. He handed each of us a small metallic card. Access passes. Don't lose them, they're keyed to your mana signature. With a final nod that seemed to encompass both respect and mild pity for what we might face in the coming days, Rogues departed, leaving us in the hallway. The housing was surprising. The frontier outpost didn't skimp. We were each given private quarters with reinforced doors, insulation, and a complimentary fruit bowl that suggested someone cared about preventing scurvy. The beds looked like they'd actually let you sleep, which was pleasantly unexpected for a place that was constantly alert for unusual activities at the border. I stepped inside my room, which was all clean lines and subtle functionality, modern comfort with a side of practical readiness. My coat landed on the back of a chair. My boots found the corner. I leaned back onto the bed, half expecting it to be rock hard, but no, just comfortable enough to be decent. Before I could properly settle, a familiar voice spoke from the doorway. "So, Captain, huh?" Rose stood there, leaning against the doorframe with an expression that mixed amusement and something harder to define. "Apparently," I replied, sitting up. "Well deserved," she said, stepping inside and glancing around the room. "Though I noticed they gave you the bigger quarters. Rank has its privileges. Want to trade?" I offered, knowing she wouldn't accept. She pursed her lips. There was a pause. Then, flash. A light brighter than thought, as if the universe blinked. My jaw dropped. Chapter 296, Third Mission, 3. A light brighter than thought, as if the universe blinked. My jaw dropped. "What are you doing, Rachel?" I asked as I looked at her, her dress gone for a nightgown. And not just any nightgown, one that seemed designed specifically to make men forget how to breathe properly. It was a whisper of silk in a shade of pale gold that complemented her hair and left very little to the imagination. "Wow, you may be the first guy getting jumped by a saintess," Luna said in my mind, but I could feel her telepathic voice trembling with something between amusement and disbelief. There was a note of impressed surprise there too, as if even she hadn't expected Rachel to be this bold. "You are so mean," Rachel said as she came forward and settled on top of my lap with the confidence of someone who had rehearsed this moment dozens of times in her head. She put her hands on my chest, pushing me down as I put my hands on the bed to steady myself. Her weight was light, but her presence felt enormous in the small room. "You made out with Rose and Cecilia but not me." Her voice carried an accusation wrapped in vulnerability, her sapphire eyes watching my reaction carefully. "Yeah, I did," I replied, holding back excuses or explanations that would only complicate things. Instead, I went with honesty. "So what? You jealous?" Rachel's sapphire eyes widened at my directness, a mixture of surprise and anticipation flooding her expression as I reached up and caressed her cheek. The simple touch seemed to unravel something in her. Her face flushed a delicate pink as she leaned into my touch like a cat seeking affection. Then, she put her hand on top of mine and began caressing it, her fingers tracing small patterns against my skin. "I'm jealous enough to imprison you," Rachel said, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow contained both playfulness and a hint of something deeper, more possessive. Her eyes had that particular gleam that suggested she wasn't entirely joking. "She got that crazy eyes," Luna commented, her mental voice carrying a note of warning. "The kind that says she might actually build a dungeon and keep you there if given half a chance." I ignored Luna's commentary, focusing instead on the girl in front of me. The frontier outpost, our mission, Marshal Malin's orders, all of it faded to background noise. "Shoo," I said as I pulled her in, one hand sliding to the back of her neck. Her golden hair was soft between my fingers, like holding sunlight. Then, I kissed her lips. Her lips were soft, warm, and tasted faintly sweet, like she'd eaten something with honey not long before coming here. Her kissing technique was sloppy compared to Cecilia's practiced precision, enthusiastic but unrefined, all passion and very little technique. She pressed too hard, moved too eagerly, clearly inexperienced but making up for it with sheer determination. It was cute, seeing her seek out my lips desperately with her sloppy technique, the way she tilted her head at slightly the wrong angle, how she seemed uncertain what to do with her hands. I held back a smile as I held her head and kissed her deeply, guiding her gently, showing her without words how to slow down, how to match my rhythm. She learned quickly, her movements becoming more synchronized with mine. Her hands finally settled on my shoulders, gripping firmly as she leaned into the kiss. A small sound escaped her throat, something between a sigh and a moan that suggested she'd been wanting this for far longer than she'd admit. "You are so good," Rachel panted as we separated, her breathing uneven, her eyes half-lidded with a mixture of wonder and desire. A strand of golden hair had fallen across her face, and I brushed it back gently. "Well, you are just bad," I said as I put my finger on her lips, her cheeks reddening more at the teasing comment. "But that's not necessarily a bad thing. It just means you need practice." Her eyes lit up at that, understanding the implication. The flush on her face spread down her neck, disappearing beneath the thin fabric of her nightgown. "So, you wanted to make out?" I asked with a tilt of my head as she nodded, a mixture of shyness and determination in her expression. "Yes," she whispered, then with more confidence, "yes, I did. I'm tired of watching from the sidelines while Rose and Cecilia, and even Serafina get ahead." "Get ahead?" I raised an eyebrow. "This isn't a race, Rachel." "Isn't it, though?" she countered, her fingers tracing a pattern on my chest. "We all want the same thing. You." There was something disarmingly honest about her statement, stripped of the usual games and pretenses that often characterized interactions between people dancing around attraction. "She's got a point," Luna chimed in. "You've collected quite the harem, Arthur." I chose to ignore that comment too. Then, we kissed again. This time, Rachel was more attentive, following my lead, mirroring my movements. Her hands moved from my shoulders to my hair, fingers threading through it with gentle curiosity. I let my own hands rest at her waist, feeling the warmth of her skin through the thin silk. When we separated again, her eyes were different, still filled with desire, but now mixed with a kind of determined focus, as if she'd added, "become better at kissing," to her personal achievement list. Rachel leaned in and kissed me again, more confidently this time. Her learning curve was impressive, already she was finding the right pressure, the right rhythm. My hands moved up her back, feeling the delicate structure of her shoulder blades beneath silk and skin. "This is getting interesting," Luna commented, her mental voice now tinged with something that felt uncomfortably close to voyeuristic enjoyment. "Though if she's staying much longer, you might want to engage the privacy protocols on the door. Unless you want private rogues walking in with a status update." That was actually a valid point. I reached out with one hand toward the door panel, activating the room's privacy settings without breaking the kiss. The lock engaged with a soft click that Rachel didn't seem to notice, too absorbed in our current activity. When we finally separated again, both slightly breathless, I found myself studying her face, the delicate curve of her cheekbones, the earnest blue of her eyes, the way her golden hair seemed to catch even the most minimal light in the room. There was something genuinely captivating about Rachel, beyond her obvious beauty. A kind of radiance that came from within. "What are you thinking?" she asked, her head tilted slightly, curiosity in her gaze. "That you're full of surprises," I answered honestly. Her smile in response was bright enough to rival the Frontier Outpost security lights. "Good," she said, settling more comfortably on my lap. "I wouldn't want to be predictable." And with that, she leaned in again, apparently intent on making up for lost time. Time seemed to blur as we continued. Minutes, perhaps longer, passed in a haze of gentle exploration and increasingly confident kisses. Rachel was a quick study, adapting to my pace, finding a rhythm that worked for both of us. Her initial clumsiness gave way to something more intentional, though still tinged with an endearing eagerness that was uniquely hers. When we finally pulled apart, her lips were slightly swollen, her hair disheveled from my fingers running through it. The composed saintess image she typically projected had given way to something more human, more vulnerable. "You learn fast," I said, tucking a strand of golden hair behind her ear. She smiled, pleased by the compliment. "I excel at everything I commit to." "Is that so?" I couldn't help but smile back. There was something refreshing about her straightforward confidence. Rachel nodded, shifting slightly on my lap. Ask anyone. Once I decide to master something, I don't stop until I've succeeded. Her eyes held mine with surprising intensity. And I've decided to master you, Arthur Nightingale. Bold declaration, Luna commented dryly in my mind. Though I think she might be underestimating the complexity of the subject matter. I raised an eyebrow. Master me? That's an interesting choice of words. Is it? Rachel tilted her head, the gesture reminiscent of a curious bird. I don't think so. I want to understand everything about you. What makes you smile, what makes you angry, what drives you? Her finger traced a line along my jaw. So, I said, now that you've gotten what you came for, are you satisfied? Her laughter was soft but genuine. For tonight, perhaps. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against mine briefly. But satisfied implies an ending. I prefer to think of this as a beginning. The weight of her on my lap, the scent of her perfume, something floral with hints of vanilla, and the warmth of her skin beneath my hands created a peculiar kind of comfort. Not just physical attraction, but something more complicated. A connection I hadn't anticipated. We should probably get some rest, I said eventually, practical concerns reasserting themselves. Early briefing tomorrow. Rachel sighed dramatically. Always responsible, even now. But she nodded and slowly disentangled herself from me, standing up with surprising grace. The nightgown caught the room's dim light, briefly outlining her silhouette before settling around her. Thank you, she said, smoothing down her hair, attempting to restore some semblance of order to her appearance. For what? For not comparing me to them, she said simply. For letting me be just Rachel. I understood immediately. Rose, Cecilia, Serafina, each carried their own formidable presence, their own distinct appeal. It would have been easy to draw comparisons, to measure one against the others. I hadn't realized she would notice the absence of such comparison. You don't need to be compared to anyone, I told her. You stand perfectly well on your own. Her smile at that moment was different from any I'd seen from her before, quieter, more genuine, touched with something that might have been gratitude or relief. I'll see you at breakfast, she asked, moving toward the door. I nodded. I'll save you a seat. Rachel paused at the doorway, her hand on the panel. She looked back at me over her shoulder, a hint of mischief returning to her expression. Don't think this means I'm going to go easy on you during the mission, Captain. I wouldn't dream of it, Lieutenant, I replied with mock seriousness. She activated the door, checking the hallway quickly to ensure it was empty. Finding no witnesses, she stepped through, but not before throwing me one last glance, part promise, part challenge. As the door slid shut behind her, I collapsed back onto the bed, staring at the ceiling. Chapter 297, Third Mission, 4. The next morning I woke precisely at 0600, my body automatically adhering to the strict military schedule despite having only spent one night at the outpost. A quick glance at the reinforced window confirmed the day had already begun outside, the harsh frontier sunlight casting long shadows across the compound. First order of business, mess hall for breakfast. After a brisk shower that alternated between scalding and frigid with military efficiency, I changed into my Mythos Academy uniform. The Frontier Outpost's mess hall was surprisingly impressive, a large, open space with high ceilings and actual windows that allowed the morning light to filter through reinforced glass. Unlike the stereotypical military canteen with its drab colors and utilitarian design, this place had clearly been built with morale in mind. The walls were painted in warm neutral tones, the lighting was bright without being harsh, and the tables, arranged in neat rows, were made of solid materials that didn't immediately bring to mind institutional dining. Clana was, predictably, asleep. Despite being fully dressed in her uniform, which somehow managed to look simultaneously pristine and rumpled. A paradox only Clana could achieve, she had folded her arms into a makeshift pillow and was currently demonstrating her remarkable ability to sleep through breakfast in a room full of people. Her soft, rhythmic breathing suggested this wasn't a light doze but a committed slumber. A small puddle of drool had formed beneath her cheek, threatening the integrity of her sleeve. Rachel noticed me first, her face lighting up with a smile that carried just a hint of the previous night's intimacy. She waved, the movement energetic enough to draw attention from nearby tables. Her golden hair caught the morning light, creating a halo effect that reinforced her saintess image with almost theatrical precision. "Arthur. We saved you a seat," she called out, gesturing to the empty chair beside her. The enthusiasm in her voice caused several nearby soldiers to glance over with barely concealed curiosity. As I approached, I noticed Rose was also present, sitting across from Rachel. Unlike Clana's abandonment of consciousness and Rachel's radiant energy, Rose maintained her usual composed elegance. Her posture was perfect, her uniform immaculate, as if she'd been awake for hours preparing for a formal inspection rather than a routine briefing. "Good morning," I said, sliding into the seat. "How are you guys feeling this morning?" I carefully avoided making any special eye contact with Rachel, aware that Rose was watching our interaction with the observational skills of a particularly attentive hawk. "They dragged me here," came a muffled voice from the table's surface. Clana raised her head just enough to fix me with one bleary eye, the violet iris clouded with the fog of interrupted sleep. "Physically. From my bed. Before. The. Sunday." Each word dropped from her mouth with the weight of a personal tragedy. "It's 0700, Clana," Rose pointed out, her tone crisp and precise. "The sun has been up for hours. In fact, it rose approximately 3 hours and 22 minutes ago. Leave it to Rose to know the exact sunrise time without checking." "Not in my room it hasn't," Clana muttered, before letting her head drop back onto her arms with the dramatic finality of someone planning to hibernate through winter. I blocked the windows with spare blankets. Perfect darkness. Was perfect sleep. Until these monsters intervened. Rachel leaned toward me, her shoulder brushing mine in a way that seemed both casual and deliberately intimate. The faint scent of her perfume, something floral with hints of vanilla, momentarily distracted me from Clana's sleep-deprived complaints. We had to practically carry her. "She sleeps like the dead, but heavier." I think at one point she was actively trying to increase her mass to make it harder for us to move her. A tactical application of my gift, came Clana's muffled response, surprising me that she was even listening. "You should eat," Rose said, pushing a tray toward me. It contained a surprisingly appetizing breakfast, scrambled eggs that actually looked fluffy rather than rubbery, some kind of golden grain with flecks of herbs, fresh fruit arranged with military precision, and bread that actually looked homemade rather than manufactured in a laboratory. "The protein content is adequate, and you'll need the energy." The Marshal seems like someone who expects peak performance. As I began eating, I became aware of the attention our table was receiving. Around us, the mess hall was filled with military personnel in various uniforms denoting their specialties and ranks. The dark blue of communications officers, the muted green of regular infantry, the slate gray of tactical specialists, all moving with the efficiency of people who had been through this routine countless times, collecting their food, finding seats, eating with purpose rather than pleasure. But many of them were watching us. Not staring outright, they were too disciplined for that, but observing from the corners of their eyes, through quick glances between bites, in the way conversations seemed to dip slightly whenever one of us moved or spoke. A table of what appeared to be junior officers kept finding reasons to refill their coffee cups at the station closest to us. "We're quite the attraction," Rose noted quietly, having noticed the same thing. Her fingers drummed a precise rhythm on the table, a habit she displayed when analyzing a situation. Like exotic animals in a menagerie. Of course, what else did we expect? Rachel sighed, though the slight lift of her chin suggested she wasn't entirely displeased with the attention. "We're from Mythos Academy. To them, we might as well be from another dimension." She had a point. Mythos Academy students were rare enough, only a few hundred in the entire world, and those from Class 2A even rarer. Add to that the presence of multiple gifted individuals, royal blood, and power levels that pushed the boundaries of what was normal for our age, and we became something between celebrities and curiosities. Living legends in training, wrapped in teenage bodies and academy uniforms. A group of younger soldiers at a nearby table weren't even trying to hide their interest. One of them, a freckled man with a freshly shaved head who couldn't have been much older than us, kept darting glances at Rachel, his expression a mixture of awe and something close to reverence. His tray remained untouched, his attention entirely captured by the golden-haired saintess 3 tables away. "I think you have an admirer," I told her quietly, nodding subtly in his direction. Rachel followed my gaze and smiled, giving the young soldier a small wave that nearly caused him to choke on his coffee. His comrades erupted into barely suppressed laughter, elbowing him mercilessly as his face turned a shade of red that would have made a sunset jealous. The poor man looked like he wanted the floor to open up and swallow him whole. "The saintess effect," Clanna commented dryly, having raised her head just enough to witness the exchange. "Very useful in diplomatic situations. Less so in combat, unless embarrassing the enemy to death becomes a viable tactic." With that profound observation delivered, she lowered her head again, apparently having exhausted her daily quota of wakefulness. "It's not just Rachel," Rose observed, her eyes scanning the room with calculated precision. "They're watching all of us. We represent something different. Power outside their normal hierarchy. Potential they can recognize but not fully comprehend." She adjusted the cuff of her sleeve with deliberate care. "We are, essentially, variables they cannot easily categorize." She was right. The soldiers around us were trained, disciplined, and many likely skilled in combat. Veterans of the frontier, faces weathered by harsh conditions and constant vigilance. But none of them had what we had: gifts, prestigious academy training, and the potential to reach ranks that many could only dream of. "They're trying to figure out if we're worth the hype," I said, understanding the dynamic. "If academy students are actually as special as they've heard, or just privileged kids playing at being soldiers." I took another bite of the surprisingly good eggs. Can't blame them, really. I'd be curious too. I finished my breakfast, which was indeed better than expected, and nudged Clanna with my elbow. "Briefing in 20 minutes. You might want to actually eat something." I doubt Marshal Maylin will accept I was hungry as an excuse for poor performance. She groaned but lifted her head and mechanically began to consume the food in front of her, eyes still half closed as if she were sleepwalking through the process. "So," Rachel said, her voice deliberately casual as she traced patterns in the condensation on her water glass, "how did everyone sleep?" The question carried a subtle weight, the lightness of her tone not quite matching the careful calculation in her eyes. The question seemed innocent enough, but I caught the subtle glance she threw my way, and the equally subtle narrowing of Rose's eyes in response. The temperature at the table seemed to drop by a few degrees, despite the mess hall's efficient climate control. "Like a baby," Rose answered, her voice smooth as polished marble. "Though I did take a little evening stroll around the compound. The security protocols here are fascinating, layers upon layers of defenses, both physical and magical. Someone invested considerable resources into making this place virtually impenetrable." She took a deliberate sip of her tea. "I'm sure you found your own way to pass the evening, Rachel." "I want to sleep more," Clanna yawned, apparently oblivious to the subtle tension. She stretched her arms above her head, nearly knocking over her water glass in the process. "But you guys unfairly dragged me out for no reason. The briefing isn't for another 20 minutes. Which is at least 15 minutes of potential sleep you've stolen from me." She narrowed her violet eyes while looking at me. "I'm keeping track, you know. There will be retribution. Possibly in the form of me falling asleep during your most important speech someday." "You were going to be late, Clanna," I said, trying not to smile at her dramatic outrage. "And somehow I doubt Marshal Maylin is the type to appreciate tardiness, no matter how creatively you justify it." A chime sounded throughout the mess hall. The tone was pleasant but insistent, immediately triggering a response from every soldier present. The soldiers around us immediately began clearing their tables with practiced efficiency, movements synchronized as if choreographed. "That's our cue," I said, standing up. "Briefing time." I felt a subtle shift in my demeanor, the casual breakfast conversation giving way to the focus required for whatever mission awaited us. This wasn't a classroom exercise or a simulated scenario. This was real frontier duty, with real consequences. Chapter 298, Third Mission, 5. Where's the briefing again? Rachel asked as we stepped into the corridor, the stark lighting here a contrast to the warmer atmosphere of the mess hall. The passageway bustled with morning activity, personnel moving with purpose rather than haste. Command Center, East Wing, Rose replied promptly, as if she'd memorized the entire compound layout overnight. Knowing Rose, she probably had. We passed it during our tour yesterday. Third intersection, right turn, past the auxiliary communications hub, second set of security doors on the left. We made our way through the compound, our academy uniforms standing out against the functional military attire of those we passed. The contrast emphasized our outsider status. We were guests here, temporary additions to a well-established ecosystem. The frontier outpost was fully awake now, personnel moving with purpose through corridors, carrying equipment, checking systems, maintaining the constant vigilance that kept the border secure. The hum of machinery and the occasional muffled announcement created a constant backdrop of sound, the heartbeat of the outpost's operations. The command center was housed in one of the more heavily reinforced sections of the complex, nestled deep within layers of security measures. The architecture here was noticeably different, less concern for aesthetics, more emphasis on function and protection. The walls were thicker, the doors heavier, the surveillance more obvious. Security here was visibly tighter, more guards, more scanners, more restricted access points. Our passes were checked twice before we were allowed to proceed to the briefing room, first by an automated system and then by a stern-faced woman whose eyes lingered on each of us as if committing our faces to memory. Mythos Academy students, Class 2A, she said, not quite a question but not quite a statement either. Marshal Meilin is expecting you. There was something in her tone, not quite awe, but a certain weight to her words that suggested she'd heard stories about us, or perhaps about the Academy in general. Grand Marshal Meilin was already there when we entered, studying a three-dimensional holographic map that hovered above the central table. Various points on the display glowed with different colors, representing data I couldn't immediately interpret. She didn't look up immediately, focused on whatever tactical information the display was providing. Her posture was perfect, her blue hair falling in a precise curtain that framed her face. Even standing still, she radiated an aura of command that filled the room. The room itself was impressive, cutting-edge technology seamlessly integrated with practical design. Screens lined the walls, some showing terrain data, others monitoring various sectors of the frontier. Tactical displays updated in real time, showing patrol movements, sensor readings, and what appeared to be mana concentration levels across different regions. A few other officers were present, standing at attention near the walls, their expressions carefully neutral. I recognized Private Rogies among them, though his posture was considerably stiffer in the marshal's presence. He gave us the briefest of nods as we entered, a nearly imperceptible acknowledgement that somehow managed to convey both greeting and warning simultaneously. So, Meilin said finally, looking up from the map to regard us with those penetrating golden eyes that seemed to see more than just physical appearance. The Academy's finest, ready for their first real assignment. Her gaze swept over us, assessing, calculating, lingering briefly on each face before moving on. Her gaze lingered on Klana, who was making a valiant effort to look fully awake, the slight tremor in her eyelids the only betrayal of her internal struggle against sleep. More or less. Let's begin, shall we, she said. Marshal Meilin tapped the holographic display, causing the map to zoom in on a specific region. The terrain was mostly forested, with rolling hills and a narrow river cutting through it. A glowing line marked what I assumed was the border between human territory and the lands beyond. Your mission is straightforward, she said, her tone clipped and efficient. Reconnaissance of Sector 17. Her finger traced a path that extended approximately 5 kilometers beyond the border. We've detected unusual movement patterns in this area over the past week. Nothing alarming, but something has changed. The hologram shifted, showing heat signature data and movement patterns represented by colored dots. The patterns were subtle, nothing that screamed immediate danger, but definitely a deviation from what I assumed was normal. Typically, the ogre clans in this region maintain consistent patrol routes. They're creatures of habit, Meilin continued. But these patrols have shifted. They're avoiding this area entirely. She indicated a roughly circular region near a small hill. We need to know why. Rose leaned forward, studying the map intently. Any theories? Several, Mei Lin replied. Could be a territorial dispute between clans. Could be they found something they want to keep to themselves. Could be nothing at all. That's what you're going to find out. She looked at each of us in turn, her golden eyes assessing. This is a reconnaissance mission only. You go in, observe, document, and return. No engagement unless absolutely necessary for survival. Is that clear? Crystal, I said, nodding. The others murmured their agreement, even Clana, who had finally achieved something resembling full consciousness. You'll be equipped with standard reconnaissance gear, mana-dampening cloaks, short-range comms, documentation devices. The mission area is beyond our surveillance network, so you'll be on your own once you cross the marker. Mei Lin's expression remained neutral, but her next words carried weight. This is a low-risk assignment, but low risk doesn't mean a no risk. The frontier is unpredictable. She gestured to Private Rogies, who stepped forward with a tablet. The detailed briefing is here. Review it thoroughly before departure. You leave at 0900. With that, she straightened, signaling the end of the briefing. Questions? Extraction protocol? I asked. Standard emergency beacon if you run into trouble. Otherwise, return to checkpoint Delta by 1700 hours. If you're not back by then, we send in a retrieval team. Her lips curved in what might have been a smile on anyone else. Try not to need it. Paperwork is excessive. Rachel raised her hand, which seemed oddly formal given the setting, but entirely in character for her. Are there any specific artifacts or phenomena we should be looking for? Mei Lin considered this for a moment. The ogre clans typically avoid areas where miasma concentrations are high. If they're steering clear of this region, it could indicate a leak or surge. Your Saintess abilities might be particularly useful in detecting that. Rachel nodded, looking pleased to have her skill specifically acknowledged. If there are no further questions, you're dismissed to prepare. Rogies will show you to the equipment room. As we turned to leave, Mei Lin added one final comment. Nightingale. I paused, looking back at her. This is a simple mission. Keep it that way. I nodded, recognizing the subtle warning for what it was. Clearly, my reputation had preceded me. An hour later, we were suited up and ready to depart. The reconnaissance gear was high quality, lightweight armor beneath mana-dampening cloaks that would help mask our presence from both conventional and magical detection. The documentation devices were compact but powerful, capable of recording visual, audio, and mana signatures simultaneously. This is actually exciting, Rachel whispered as we approached the checkpoint that would take us beyond the frontier's defensive perimeter. She looked different in the field gear, less like the radiant Saintess and more like the capable combatant I knew she could be when necessary. It's a glorified nature walk, Clana muttered, though even she seemed more alert now, her fingers absently tracing spell patterns in the air, a habit she'd developed to keep her casting reflexes sharp. Rose adjusted her equipment one final time, every movement precise. Nature walk or not, stay alert. Ogres may be predictable in their patrols, but they're unpredictable in their reactions. The checkpoint was a reinforced outpost at the edge of the frontier's defensive line, the last bit of human civilization before the wilderness beyond. A small team of soldiers manned it, monitoring the border for any signs of incursion. The officer in charge, a weathered woman with lieutenant's bars and eyes that had seen more than they should, gave us a final once-over. Follow your waypoints, she advised, pointing to the navigation device I'd been given as team leader. The path will keep you clear of known patrol routes. Maintain calm silence unless absolutely necessary. Sound travels further than you'd think out there. With a final nod, she activated the gate in the perimeter fence, creating an opening just large enough for us to pass through single file. Good hunting, she said, though we weren't hunting anything. Or so we thought. The frontier beyond the perimeter was both exactly what I expected and somehow totally different. The forest wasn't dark and foreboding as stories often portrayed the wilderness. It was vibrant, alive with colors and sounds that had a primal energy to them. Sunlight filtered through the canopy, creating dappled patterns on the forest floor. Birds called to each other overhead. If not for the knowledge that we were in potentially hostile territory, it might have been peaceful. "It's beautiful," Rachel murmured, voicing my thoughts. "And dangerous," Rose added, ever practical. "Stay focused." We moved in formation. I took point, with Rose and Rachel behind me, and Clana covering our rear. For someone who seemed perpetually exhausted, Clana moved with surprising grace through the undergrowth, one hand always poised to cast a defensive spell at the first sign of trouble. The navigation device led us along a winding path that avoided open areas when possible, keeping us under the cover of the forest canopy. According to the map, we were making good time toward our objective. About 3 kilometers in, Rachel suddenly paused, her head tilting slightly as if listening to something only she could hear. "What is it?" I asked, keeping my voice low. "I'm not sure," she replied, her brow furrowed in concentration. "There's something off about the mana currents here." We all stopped, instinctively forming a defensive circle as Rachel closed her eyes, extending her senses. As a saintess, her ability to detect and purify corrupted mana was unparalleled among our group. "It's subtle," she said finally. "But there's a pattern to the flow that isn't natural. It's being directed toward our objective?" Rose asked. Rachel nodded slowly. "I think so. Like water flowing downhill, but deliberately channeled." That was interesting. Mana flowing naturally tended to create random patterns, following the path of least resistance. Directed flow meant intelligence, purpose. It meant someone or something was manipulating the energy. Chapter 299, Third Mission, 6. Let's proceed with extra caution, I decided. Clana, can you prepare a detection spell? Something passive that won't give away our position. Clana nodded, her fingers already weaving intricate patterns in the air. Her gift, spell synergy, allowed her to cast multiple spells simultaneously and blend them together in ways most mages couldn't achieve. Despite her perpetually sleepy demeanor, she was one of the most skilled spellcasters in our year. "Passive detection grid, layered with mana echo," she murmured, her eyes half closed in concentration. Faint blue lines of light briefly appeared around us before fading from visibility. "It'll ping if anything larger than a rabbit comes within 50 meters. We continued forward, moving more slowly now, more deliberately. The forest grew denser as we approached the area marked on our map, the undergrowth thicker, as if nature itself was trying to hide something. It turned out to be nothing more dramatic than a recent landslide that had exposed a mineral deposit known to be toxic to ogres. The strange mana currents Rachel detected were simply the natural result of the earth being disturbed. Clana's spell grid confirmed there was nothing unnatural about the site, just a geological event that made the area inhospitable to the local tribes. As we completed our documentation and prepared to head back, I noticed something unusual on a tree near our position. Fresh marks carved into the bark, 3 diagonal slashes followed by a horizontal line. The pattern was precisely made, too deliberate to be random animal claw marks. "What's that?" Rachel asked, noticing me examining the tree. "Trail marking, maybe," I said, though something about it felt off. I took an image with the documentation device, almost as an afterthought. The journey back to the outpost was uneventful, and Marshal Maylin seemed satisfied with our report. As we were finishing our debrief, I mentioned the marking. 3 slashes and a horizontal line. Carved recently. Malin's expression changed for just a fraction of a second, so briefly I almost missed it. A tightening around her eyes, a subtle tension in her jaw. "Show me," she said, her tone carefully neutral. When I displayed the image, she studied it in silence before closing the file with a deliberate tap. "Is it significant?" I asked. "It's a trail marker," she confirmed. Used by higher-ranking members of the Savage Communion when they travel without an entourage. You performed well today. A simple mission completed successfully. Malin's words had been the sort of ambiguous that made people nervous. Not the ship is sinking sort of nervous, but definitely you might want to double-check the lifeboat's nervous. She'd mentioned high-ranking, Savage Communion members in the vicinity with all the enthusiasm of someone who'd found a spider the size of a fist behind their couch and then lost sight of it. Which, in Malin terms, probably meant something like an orc chieftain, an ogre chief, or, if the universe was feeling particularly comedic, a cardinal from the Savage Communion. None of those were great options. The kind of figures you didn't so much fight as survive long enough for someone else to take over. Preferably someone with more firepower and significantly better life insurance. Still, I wasn't afraid. That wasn't bravado. Not entirely, anyway. It was more statistical optimism. We had Malin with us. A peak immortal rancor. A walking magical catastrophe, second only to Valen Ashbluff in the Western continent, and stronger than the Tower Master of the Ebony Tower, which really said something, considering the Tower Master could probably blow up a moon if he ever got in a bad mood. Malin could probably blow up 2 moons and have enough energy left over to order a coffee, non-dairy with just a hint of cinnamon. The frontier outpost itself seemed to recognize Malin's significance. Soldiers straightened a little more when she passed, conversations quieted, and even the automated defense system seemed to hum a bit more attentively. Fear wasn't quite the right word for what they felt. It was more like the instinctive respect you might have for a thunderstorm or an active volcano, natural forces that could annihilate you without particularly meaning to. For now, though, there were no exploding moons. We had completed the preliminary task Malin had given us, some kind of glorified border scouting operation that was about as dangerous as poking a hedgehog with a stick if the hedgehog was asleep and mildly anemic. Nothing had gone wrong, nobody died, and Clana only fell asleep once while standing up, which was a personal best. She'd claimed afterward that she was monitoring the tactical situation through passive sensory input, which was Clana speak for, I can nap and scout simultaneously. After returning to camp, we found a quiet spot behind the barracks, a little patch of cracked stone and synthetic moss that passed for a park in these parts. The kind of place where soldiers pretended they were on a picnic while surrounded by automated turrets and anti-orc barrier nodes. Someone had made a valiant attempt to plant flowers, tough, radiation-resistant blossoms that thrived in the sort of conditions that would make most plant life file for immediate retirement. Rachel leaned back against my shoulder, eyes closed, humming faintly. The tune was something old, a folk song from the eastern continent, though she'd probably claim it was a sacred hymn if anyone asked. Rose sat across from us, legs crossed, doing something graceful with a pocket mirror and a portable manicure device that probably cost more than a small spaceship. The device hummed with more technological sophistication than most battlefield weapons. And Clana. Clana was laying on the ground, arms folded behind her head, blinking up at the sky like she was waiting for it to blink back. A nearby soldier had walked past her twice, clearly debating whether to check if she was dead or just observing her natural habitat. You're not actually asleep, are you? I asked her. No, she said, without moving. Just practicing. For what? Surviving this insanity by conserving my energy. She wiggled her fingers vaguely toward the sky. You know, the stuff that keeps the rest of you moving around like caffeinated hamsters. I chuckled, tossing her a ration bar. She caught it without looking, her hand moving with surprising precision for someone who appeared to be auditioning for the role of corpse. You're a very lazy soldier. I'm efficient, she said, unwrapping it with the delicate care usually reserved for defusing bombs. Same thing. The less you move, the less energy you waste, the longer you survive. It's basic mathematics. Admit it, I said, you're starting to enjoy our company. She squinted over at me, one eye opening just enough to suggest mild interest. You're tolerable. Rachel talks too much. Rose is too shiny. But you, yeah, you're all right. For someone who seems determined to find trouble in places most people would actively avoid. It was the Clana version of friendship, High praise indeed from someone who usually expressed affection by not actively walking away from you mid-conversation. I gave her a slow nod. High praise. She grinned faintly, the expression looking almost foreign on her perpetually tired face. Just don't die, all right? Paperwork for deceased team members is excessive, and I'd have to be awake to file it. Not planning on it. Rachel shifted against my shoulder, her golden hair catching the afternoon light in a way that seemed deliberately photogenic. This is nice, she said softly. Almost makes you forget we're sitting on the edge of civilization, surrounded by creatures that would happily use our bones as toothpicks. Your optimism is inspiring, Rose remarked dryly, not looking up from her manicure. The tiny device in her hand emitted a soft beep of completion. Though I must admit, this assignment has been less hazardous than expected. Don't jinx it, Clana muttered, her eyes closed again. Universe loves a challenge. As if on cue, a messenger approached, a young private who looked like he'd been chosen for the task through a particularly brutal game of knotted among his peers. He saluted stiffly, his gaze darting between us like he wasn't quite sure which academy student might spontaneously explode. Captain Nightingale, he said, addressing me with the careful tone of someone handling unexploded ordnance. Grand Marshal Meilin requests your team's presence tomorrow at 0600 hours. Full field gear, prepared for extended reconnaissance. Any specifics? I asked. The private swallowed visibly. No, sir. The marshal just said, and I quote, tell them to be ready for anything and not to bring anything they can't afford to lose. With that cheerful message delivered, he retreated with the brisk efficiency of someone who had successfully completed a suicide mission and wasn't about to press his luck. Well, Rose said into the ensuing silence. That sounds ominous. Could be routine, Rachel offered, though her tone suggested she didn't believe it either. Clana sighed deeply. This is exactly what I was talking about. Universe. Challenge. Immediate response. She sat up with the reluctance of continental drift. I'm going to take a preemptive nap. Wake me when we're about to die. The peace didn't last. The next day, Meilin summoned us again, exactly as the messenger had warned. She took us with her. No reason given. Just said we were to accompany her on patrol. Which, again, wasn't how things usually went. Grand Marshals didn't do patrols either. Not unless they were expecting something that couldn't be left to people who hadn't leveled entire fortresses with a sneeze. It was like having the general personally inspect an anthill that had been giving the regular troops trouble. We followed her into the wastes, riding in a hover truck shaped like a beetle and sounding like it had asthma. The vehicle protested each elevation change with a wheezing noise that suggested it was contemplating early retirement. The landscape outside was a patchwork of scrubland and rocky outcroppings, occasionally interrupted by the twisted remains of trees that had evolved to survive in conditions that would make most plant life file a formal complaint. Rachel, Rose, and Clana rode in the back compartment while I sat up front with Meilin. She drove in silence, her golden eyes fixed on the horizon, occasionally checking a device on her wrist that displayed information in a format I couldn't quite decipher. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, exactly, but it had weight to it, the kind of silence that comes before important words. Eventually, as we stopped near a ridgeline that offered a panoramic view of the frontier's edge, she pulled me aside. Walk with me, Arthur. I did, following her to a rocky outcropping that overlooked a vast expanse of borderland. From here, you could see where the controlled territory ended and the wilder regions began, a transition marked not by any physical barrier but by a subtle shift in the landscape itself. Something about the quality of the light, perhaps, or the way the vegetation grew. You've studied necromancy, she said, her voice as flat as ever. Some, I nodded. It's one of my focuses, yes. But I'm not purely a necromancer. That's fine, she said. I'm not either. You know what necromancy really is? Raising the dead, I offered. She snorted, the sound almost startlingly human coming from someone who generally presented herself with all the emotional range of a particularly stoic rock. No. It's control. Understanding. It's the discipline of keeping things from falling apart when they already should have. Necromancy is balance, Arthur. Not just bones and corpses. It's memory, legacy, structure and decay. And you? You have potential. I blinked, surprised by the assessment. Mei Lin wasn't known for casual compliments or mentorship speeches. Is that why you brought me? Part of it, she said, her eyes scanning the horizon with the practiced vigilance of someone who had survived countless battles by never assuming safety. The other part is that I have a very bad feeling. Which, coming from someone like Mei Lin, was the equivalent of being told by a dragon that they smelled smoke. Not just concerning, downright apocalyptic. Bad feeling as in we're being watched. And I wanted more of a reason to stop him. As soon as her words dropped, so did the sky. Chapter 300, Third Mission, 7. I've always believed in being carefully ambiguous when delivering bad news. Not so vague that people think everything's fine, but not so clear that they panic. It's a delicate balance, like telling someone to check their safety equipment without mentioning you've spotted a bomb. So when I mentioned high-ranking, Savage Communion members in the vicinity to those Academy kids, I kept my tone neutral. Professional. The kind of voice you use when discussing slightly concerning weather patterns rather than the potential arrival of genocidal maniacs. These weren't just any Academy students either. Mythos Academy's finest, a fact they wore like invisible badges, visible to anyone with enough perception to see past their youth. Arthur Nightingale, almost integration rank, with a gift that made necromancers twice his age look incompetent. The Saintess, Rachel, whose healing abilities could bring someone back from the brink of death with a touch. Rose, with her reality-bending paradox manipulation. Even Clanna, perpetually half asleep but capable of layering spells in ways that defied conventional understanding. Talented, yes. But still children playing at being soldiers. The Western continent had been my responsibility for a long time now. Second only to Valen Ashbluff himself in raw power, I had earned every scar, every rank, every whispered legend. I brought the Academy students with me on patrol, not standard procedure by any measure. Grand Marshals don't do patrols. We coordinate them, plan them, review reports from them. We don't personally trudge through borderlands unless we're expecting something that requires our direct attention. But I needed them with me today. Not for their protection, that would be absurd, but because their presence would force me to make the right choice when the moment came. The hover truck wheezed asthmatically as we traveled, its systems protesting every bump and dip in the uneven terrain. Frontier equipment was always like this, functional but complaining, like a soldier who does their job perfectly while grumbling the entire time. I pulled Arthur aside when we reached the ridgeline. Of the four, he showed the most promise in necromancy, my own specialty. Not that he was purely a necromancer, his talents were more diverse than that. But he understood the fundamentals in a way that suggested intuition rather than mere study. Walk with me, Arthur, I said, keeping my voice neutral. He followed without question. Good. Not all brilliance comes with obedience. You've studied necromancy, I stated. Not a question. I'd read his file, watched him practice. Some, he nodded. It's one of my focuses, yes. But I'm not purely a necromancer. That's fine, I told him. I'm not either. I paused, considering how to explain. You know what necromancy really is? Raising the dead, he offered, giving the textbook answer. I couldn't help but snort at that. So many years of teaching, and they still started with the most simplistic understanding. No. It's control. Understanding. It's the discipline of keeping things from falling apart when they already should have. Necromancy is balance, Arthur. Not just bones and corpses. It's memory, legacy, structure and decay. And you? You have potential. He blinked, surprise flickering across his face. Is that why you brought me? Part of it, I admitted. The other part is that I have a very bad feeling. His expression told me he understood the weight of that statement. Good. The boy wasn't an idiot. Bad feeling as in, he prompted. As in we're being watched. And I want someone with me who can raise a wall of corpses and make it polite. I allowed myself a small smile, barely there, but genuine. The boy had earned that much honesty, at least. The truth was, I hadn't slept properly since seeing that marking in their report. 3 diagonal slashes with a horizontal line, the Axe King's personal trail marker. I knew exactly what it meant. The Axe King himself was moving along our frontier. I immediately contacted Valen Ashbluff, the king of the Western continent. The only being on this continent who could face the Axe King with certainty of victory. The message I received in return was polite, diplomatic, and utterly useless. Valen was halfway across the world on some crucial diplomatic mission. He would return, as soon as circumstances permitted. Circumstances. As if the Axe King's presence along our frontier was a minor scheduling inconvenience rather than an existential threat. I brought these students with me for a reason. Not because they could help against what was coming, they couldn't. But because their presence would ensure I made the right choice when the moment came. I would do whatever was necessary to ensure they survived. To ensure the future they represented would have a chance. I felt it before I saw anything, a ripple in the ambient mana, like a stone dropped into a still pond. Then the temperature plummeted, the air itself seeming to recoil from what was approaching. Even the ground beneath our feet trembled slightly. Get back to the truck, I told Arthur, my voice calm despite everything. Take the others and go. Now. To his credit, he didn't waste time asking questions. He saw something in my face that told him everything he needed to know. Marshal, he began. That's an order, Captain, I said firmly. Go. He hesitated for just a moment, then nodded and turned, running back toward where the others waited. I turned to face the approaching presence, drawing on my gift. Deep dark swirled around me, responding to my call, not just from recent deaths but from the accumulated weight of all the battles this land had witnessed. The western frontier was saturated with death, it was my perfect battlefield. The air split open about 50 meters away, not a portal in the conventional sense, but a tear in reality itself. Through it stepped a figure that could only be the Axe King. He was massive, nearly 2 meters tall, his skin covered in ritual scars that glowed with internal power. His armor was crafted from the bones of powerful creatures and metals that shouldn't exist in nature. And his axe, the weapon that gave him his title, was a monstrous thing of black metal that seemed to devour light. Marshal Maelin Potton, he said, his voice surprisingly cultured despite the tusks that protruded from his lower jaw. The second pillar of the Western continent. I've looked forward to meeting you. Axe King, I replied evenly. You're trespassing on Western territory. He laughed, the sound like stones grinding together. Am I? The borders between our domains have always been fluid. Especially when Valen Ashbluff is absent. So he knew. Of course he knew. The Axe King's intelligence network was legendary. Valen's absence is temporary, I said. Mine isn't. Brave words, he acknowledged, hefting his enormous axe. But we both know the truth. Without Valen, you cannot stop what's coming. Perhaps not, I agreed. But I can delay it. I felt the hover truck activate behind me, its engines whining as it lifted off. Good. The students were leaving. They would report what happened here. They would prepare the frontier for what was coming. The Axe King noticed too. His eyes, eerily intelligent for an orc, flicked toward the retreating vehicle, then back to me. Sending away your reinforcements? Unwise. They're not my reinforcements, I said. They're my purpose. Understanding dawned in his eyes. Ah. You mean to sacrifice yourself. Honorable, but futile. We'll see. I gathered my power, channeling it through eternal cycle. Deep dark swirled around me in visible currents, the air itself darkening as I drew on decades of mastery. This would be my final act, a culmination of everything I had learned, everything I had become. The Axe King raised his weapon, miasma coalescing around it. Your sacrifice will be remembered, Marshal, he said, almost respectfully. But it will not save them. It doesn't need to save them, I replied. It just needs to give them time. He leaped forward with impossible speed for something so large, his axe describing a perfect arc toward my head. I met it with everything I had, pushing my gift to its absolute limit. Death energy erupted from me in a catastrophic wave, the perfect counter to his strike. The resulting collision was blinding, deafening, a cataclysm of opposed forces meeting in perfect destruction. And in that final moment, as the Axe King's weapon fell and my life force surged to meet it, I smiled. Not the ghost of a smile, not a hint of one, but a true, genuine expression of peace. I had found my courage. Not in the absence of fear, but in its acknowledgement and transcendence. These students, these children playing at being soldiers, they were the future. A future worth dying for. The blade fell, and the world went white.